Let me tell you about the worst day of my life. And trust me, I've had some genuinely terrible days to compare it against. It started with a needle. Cold, thin, slid into my arm inside a government clinic that smelled like bleach and quiet desperation. The nurse didn't even look at me. She grabbed my arm, wiped it with alcohol, and jabbed me like I was a pincushion. She was tired. Of awakening test, she said. Like those two words explained everything. Like they didn't just decide whether I'd matter in this world or not. My name is Kai Soren, 20 years old. And up until that moment, I was nobody. Completely, utterly, spectacularly nobody at all. I worked part-time at a convenience store, paid half my rent late every month. My most impressive skill was folding cardboard boxes fast. The world had changed 6 years ago when the gates appeared. Massive glowing rifts tearing open in the sky like the universe got fed up with us. Out of those gates came monsters, creatures that didn't belong here, didn't follow any rules we understood, and didn't care about our feelings. Some people awakened because of the gates. They got powers, got ranked, got famous. They became hunters. The rest of us just tried to survive. I always figured I was firmly in the rest of us category. Just a regular guy watching the world burn from behind a convenience store counter. Then my friend Daro called me. Said the new government awakening program was registering people in our district. Completely free. No strings. What have you got to lose, Kai? His voice was way too cheerful for someone suggesting I let a stranger inject something into my arm. I went. Obviously I went. Because being 20 years old, broke, and working retail is a powerful motivator for trying literally anything else. The clinic was packed. About 40 of us sat in plastic chairs, all pretending we weren't nervous while being extremely visibly nervous. There was a guy in the corner flexing his arms over and over like he was warming up for something massive. A girl biting her thumbnail to nothing. Me? I sat there counting ceiling tiles. 14. Counted them 3. Times just to be absolutely certain. That's how calm I was about it all. They called us one by one into a back room. People came out looking either crushed or trying very hard not to look too excited about something. When they called my name, I walked in like I was heading to a dentist appointment. Unpleasant, but survivable. That was my entire strategy going in. The technician, a tired man with a coffee stain on his coat, explained the process without once making eye contact with me. Very efficient. The needle injects a tracing compound that reacts to latent mana in the bloodstream. If you have awakened potential, a rank appears within 60 seconds. He jabbed the needle in. I stared at the ceiling. There was a water stain up there, shaped like a duck. I focused very hard on that duck. 30 seconds. Nothing on the readout. The technician started scribbling on his clipboard. The universal gesture for don't get your hopes up. 50 seconds. Still nothing. He glanced at me with that specific professional pity that people in that line of work get extremely good at over time. Then, the machine beeped. His pen stopped. He stared at the readout, then at me, then back at the readout. His eyebrows did something complicated. He said. Just that. One flat syllable, like I was a strange bug he'd never encountered before and wasn't sure what to do about. Rank C. Ability, enhanced auditory perception. I read it twice. Then, 3 times. Blinked at it like it might change if I waited long enough. C rank was low. Not embarrassing exactly, but nothing to write home about either. Middle of the pack. The participation trophy of hunter rankings. But the ability? Enhanced auditory perception. I had absolutely no idea what that meant yet. My brain was still stuck on the word rank. It means you have good hearing, the technician said flatly, apparently reading my confusion clearly off my face without any effort at all. He said it the way you'd tell someone their superpower was tying shoelaces a little faster than average, completely deadpan, zero emotion, perfect delivery. I walked back out into the waiting room. Darrow looked at me with huge eyes, the kind of eyes that wanted very badly to be hopeful about something. C rank, I said. I can hear stuff. He stared at me for a long moment, then he started laughing. The helpless kind where you feel bad but can't stop. Kai, he wheezed between laughs. That is genuinely the most useless thing I have ever heard. And then he realized the word he'd used and laughed even harder. I stood there and let him finish. It took a while. Then I went home and sat on my bed, staring at my apartment ceiling, which had no interesting stains. Enhanced auditory perception. While other hunters were throwing fireballs and lifting cars, I was going to sit there and listen very carefully. Great. I fell asleep telling myself it was fine. It was not fine at all, but sleep has always been remarkably good at lying to you about exactly that kind of thing. The next morning I woke up and the entire world was too loud. That is the only way I know how to accurately describe what happened when I opened my eyes. My neighbor, 3 doors down, was arguing with someone on the phone. I could hear every single word, clearly, like she was standing right next to me. The couple upstairs was having breakfast. I heard their spoons scraping cereal bowls. Heard one of them set down a glass of water on the counter. I heard a dog barking 2 streets away. I heard rain hitting a window somewhere deep in the building. I heard my own heartbeat going way too fast. I stumbled to the bathroom and turned on the faucet. The sound of the water hit me like a physical wall, and I grabbed the sink to stay upright. This was enhanced auditory perception. This was my special power, the ability to be completely destroyed by an ordinary Tuesday morning. Incredible. It took me 2 full hours to figure out how to dial it back, how to focus, how to choose what I was listening to instead of receiving everything. It was like learning to look at just one thing in a very crowded, very loud room. Possible. But it required real effort and gave me a headache all day. By the end of that first week, I could control it. I could reach out with my hearing like extending a hand, pulling sounds in from further and further away. 1 block, then 3 blocks. Then by the end of week 2, over a kilometer away. Clear as a conversation happening directly beside me in a quiet room. I could hear heartbeats. That was the part that genuinely surprised me. Every person has a distinct rhythm, and I started knowing people by their pulse before I saw their faces. I caught it every single time, without exception, without fail. It was like watching someone's face turn red when embarrassed. Completely impossible to fake. And I could hear things that were about to happen. A monster's muscles tensing before it moved. A person's breathing shifting just before they acted. Half a second of warning. In a real fight, half a second is everything. I started to think this ability might not be as pointless as advertised. I was still wrong about a lot of things back then, but I was at least getting warmer on the useful question, which felt like meaningful progress. 3 weeks after my awakening, I registered as a hunter. C rank, ability listed as enhanced auditory perception. The woman at the desk typed it without blinking. I was assigned to the Valen Hunter Association branch in my district. Mid-tier organization, solid reputation, nothing glamorous. Completely fine by me. I showed up on my first day not knowing what to expect. I had a badge, a cheap set of standard issue gear, and an ability everyone was going to underestimate. My first day, I walked into the common room and immediately became aware of 2 things, because my awareness had gotten annoyingly precise about everything. First, everyone in that room was physically intimidating in ways that I clearly, visibly was not. Built differently, moved differently, existed differently. Second, they were already talking about me. I knew because I could hear them whispering about my ability listing from across the room before they even looked up. C-rank hearing guy, someone muttered. Big man with a scar across his jaw. His name was Brock. I knew because someone else whispered it as a warning to me. What's he going to do? Listen the monsters to death? A woman leaned back in her chair with the easy confidence of someone who had never once doubted her own value. Her name was Sarah, B-rank elemental. She could throw lightning. Had been doing this for 4 years. She looked at the world like it owed her a good time. I stood in the doorway. Last month's version of me would have apologized for existing and shuffled directly to the nearest corner to sit quietly. That felt distant now. I can hear your heartbeat from here, Sarah, I said calmly. Yours is running a little fast right now. Something making you nervous this morning? The room went quiet. Sarah's eyes narrowed sharply. Her heartbeat actually jumped when I said it, which I found extremely useful to know about her. Brock snorted. Party trick? He turned back to his card game. The others lost interest one by one. I found a chair in the corner and sat in it. Fine. Let them underestimate me. In my limited but growing experience, that turned out to be a genuinely useful position to operate from strategically. My first 3 missions were textbook C rank work. Scout duty on the edge of gate zones, monitor and report, no engagement unless absolutely necessary. Boring, completely uneventful. Exactly the kind of missions you give to new hunters you're not expecting much of. I completed all 3 without incident. I didn't complain, didn't ask for more. Just filed the reports neatly and showed up on time and let people keep thinking whatever they wanted to think. On the 4th mission, everything changed. I don't say that as an expression or a figure of speech. I mean it literally. Everything changed on mission 4. It was a routine gate monitoring job in the warehouse district on the eastern edge of the city. Yellow classification, low activity, stable observation work. Me, a kid named Finn who had a fire spark ability, and a quiet woman named Yael who could generate small but reliable barriers around herself and others. The gate was supposed to be completely stable. 4 hours of observation, then rotate out. The kind of mission you could practically do half asleep. We were 40 minutes in when I heard something that wasn't supposed to be there. A sound from inside the gate, low and rhythmic and purposeful. Not the random snarling and shuffling that monsters usually made when they were milling around near a gate entrance. This was different, coordinated. This was something moving with clear intention. Something that had a plan. And it was inside that gate, getting closer to the edge with every passing second. I grabbed Finn's arm. He looked at me, immediately annoyed. Behind us, Yael had already turned her head. The gate itself looked completely unchanged. Something's wrong inside that gate, I said quietly. There's a pack in there, moving together, coordinating their approach to the edge right now. Finn stared at me. Then, at the gate, which looked exactly as it had for 40 minutes, a rippling, ugly purple tear in the air, perfectly still on the surface. It looks completely fine, Yael said. Her voice was careful and measured. She was taking me more seriously than Finn was, which I noted and appreciated. I know what it looks like, I said. I'm telling you what I can hear. 9 distinct heartbeats inside the gate perimeter, moving in a hunting pattern. I'd never hunted anything in my life, grew up entirely in apartments, but something in my brain recognized that specific rhythm as predatory and was very insistent about it. We need to call for backup right now, I said, before whatever's in there finishes deciding to come through. Finn pulled out his communicator. His expression said he thought I was a nervous rookie overreacting on my 4th mission, but he started to dial anyway because arguing took longer than dialing. His finger was hovering over the call button. That was when the gate erupted and gave all 3 of us absolutely no more time for discussion. 9 of them came through at once. Shadow-class monsters, roughly wolf-shaped but wrong in every detail, like something wearing a wolf as a disguise. Proportions slightly off, movements too smooth, eyes that tracked with a calculation you never saw in the lesser monsters that came through on routine sweeps. They coordinated the moment they cleared the gate. 2 broke hard left, 3 broke hard right, and 4 came charging directly at us in a straight line. Finn yelped and threw a fire burst immediately, caught one monster mid-stride. It screamed, a horrible sound, and went down in a heap. 8 left. Yael snapped a barrier up between us and the 4 charging directly at our position. Fast, clean reaction. The barrier stopped them cold on contact. The barrier held for about 2 seconds before they started tearing at it. 2 seconds is enough time if you know exactly what to do with every single moment of it. Here is something about enhanced auditory perception that I hadn't fully understood yet at that point in my very short hunter career. It doesn't just work at long range. Up close, it's even more complete. Every sound, every movement, every breath, all of it arriving with perfect, sharp clarity. And what I heard in those 2 seconds was this: the monsters weren't focused on all 3 of us equally. They had identified a primary target. It was Finn. His fire ability had registered as the biggest threat. They were going to take him down first, then handle the rest of us without the dangerous one in the mix. Finn, left, now, I said, not shouting, just completely certain in a way that came through clearly. He dove left on pure survival instinct. The monster that had been setting itself up behind him during the confusion, the one he couldn't see at all, missed him by less than half a meter. I heard the 2 flanking units coming in from our left, moving low and fast and very confident. Yael, drop the barrier. Step back 3 steps exactly. She looked at me for 1 full second. Her heartbeat spiked with doubt and fear all at once, but she dropped the barrier and stepped back 3 steps. The 2 flanking monsters hit the space where the barrier had been and slammed directly into the 4 that had been pressing against it from the other side. 6 monsters in a tangled, chaotic pile for one beautiful moment. Finn lit them up. 6 burning at once. Not elegant. Fire doesn't need to be elegant. The last 2 had broken left at the very start of the fight. I'd been tracking them by sound through the entire engagement. I knew exactly where they were. I turned and pointed at the crate stack in the far corner of the warehouse. Both of them. Right behind there. They've been waiting this whole time. Yael built 2 rapid barriers on either side of the stack without any hesitation at all this time. She'd made a decision about something and it showed clearly. Finn burned the crate stack. The screaming lasted about 4 seconds. Then it was quiet. Smoke settling. 3 of us standing there breathing deliberately and hard. Finn looked at me. His face had gone through too many expressions during those 90 seconds to count. He hadn't settled on one yet, and I didn't blame him. How did you know where they were? He asked. His voice was slower than usual, more careful. How did you know any of that before it happened? I thought about trying to explain it properly. The heartbeats shifting before they moved. The one behind him setting its feet to leap before it committed. The 2 hiding behind the crate stack breathing in a specific controlled pattern, slow and patient in a way that was somehow more frightening than the ones who charged. Good ears, I said. Finn stared at me for a moment, then he laughed, sharp and exhausted and genuinely relieved. The laugh of someone who expected to die. We filed the incident report. Back at the branch, I heard Brock reading it from 2 rooms away, heard him go quiet, heard him read something a second time, heard him say something low to Sarah afterward. I won't repeat exactly what it was, but his heartbeat when he said it had changed. Less dismissive than before. I smiled at the wall of my corner and said absolutely nothing about it. There was genuinely no need to say a single thing. Let them figure it out slowly. Let them keep calling it a party trick. Let them assume I was getting lucky, right up until the moment when it would matter most and be impossible to ignore. I had learned something real in that warehouse during those 90 seconds, something I was going to carry with me for a very long time after that night. In a world full of people who could hit harder, run faster, and throw fire, the person who knows what's coming next has an advantage you simply cannot punch around. And I could always hear what was coming next. That turned out to matter more than I had started to understand, more than I even had words for yet. The week after the warehouse incident, the branch started assigning me to better missions. Nothing dramatic. No one was suddenly pinning S-rank hopes on a C-rank kid, but the quality of the assignments shifted noticeably. I started working with more experienced teams instead of being paired with other new entries. B-rank hunters, who'd been doing this for years. People who carried a quiet, specific competence that only comes from surviving things that should have ended them. Sarah ended up on my team 3 times that month. She never exactly apologized for the party trick comment, but she completely stopped making them. For someone like Sarah, that was basically a formal written apology delivered in an envelope with a wax seal. I accepted it without ever mentioning it. Brock remained skeptical. And Brock was skeptical about everything as a deliberate and apparently very comfortable personality choice he'd made years ago. 6 years as a B-rank hunter and firm opinions about absolutely everything in the known world. That was Brock in its entirety. Unmovable. Consistent. His heartbeat was honest, though, and his honest heartbeat said he was paying significantly more attention to me than his face ever let on to anyone. I settled into a rhythm. Mission, return, file report, sleep, repeat. Normal hunter life, or what passed for normal in a world with rifts in the sky, and I kept practicing with my ability during every free moment I had, pushing the range further, learning to filter more precisely, getting more accurate. I started testing the heartbeat detection, walking through the branch, making quiet assessments. Who was anxious today? Who was hiding something from someone? Who was telling the truth? And who was constructing a very careful version of the truth that technically wasn't lying but absolutely wasn't honest either? There's a whole spectrum between lying and being truthful, and I was starting to be able to map exactly where any given person sat on it at any given moment. That's a strange thing to know about everyone around you. It changes how you see people. Not worse, necessarily, just more clearly, more completely. I started cataloging the hunters in the branch by their baseline rhythms, learned what normal sounded like for each person specifically. Then noticed deviations. Sarah's heartbeat sped up slightly every time a specific name came up in briefings. Interesting. I filed that information somewhere useful and said nothing. One of the junior staff members had a very specific pattern when he talked about the weekly supply deliveries. Also interesting. Also filed. Also silent. I didn't know yet what I was building toward with all of this collected information. I just knew that information gathered quietly was almost always worth having. That instinct turned out to be correct. It turned out to be the most correct thing I had ever instinctively known in my entire 20 years of life. Then I heard something I was absolutely not supposed to hear. And everything, once again, changed completely and immediately and without any warning at all. It was late. I was walking back to the branch after filing paperwork at the district administrative office 3 blocks away. Boring errand. C-rank work. The warehouse district at night was quiet in a way that daytime never quite managed. My footsteps on pavement. A cat somewhere close by. Distant traffic. I had my hearing extended out on habit. Range set at about 400 meters, sweeping slowly. Just checking the environment. Just knowing what was around me. 2 voices came in from an alley off the main street. Low and careful and coming from people who were very practiced at not being overheard by anyone. I wouldn't have caught them on a normal human's hearing. They were being genuinely careful. Professional level quiet. The kind that took real practice to achieve. But my range was extended and the night was still and I caught them cleanly. Both voices. Every word. Clear as if I was standing right there with them. I stopped mid-step on the sidewalk. 1 foot still raised, every muscle in my body going completely still while my mind accelerated in the opposite direction. The shipment clears the gate on Friday, a man's voice said. Low and deliberate, the voice of someone who had been keeping serious secrets for a long time professionally. The Valen branch team does the routine sweep on Friday evening. They won't find it. The search pattern doesn't cover the secondary loading zone. A pause, then the second voice. A woman, colder, more precise than the man. The voice of someone who dealt in outcomes rather than plans. And if they do? They won't, the man said. We have someone inside the branch. A beat of silence. Someone who makes sure the right things get missed on the right nights. Someone inside the Valen branch. My branch. A mole actively working to make sure certain gate shipments went undetected by the team doing the monitoring. I stood on that dark sidewalk and breathed very slowly and carefully through my nose and pointed every bit of my ability directly at that alley. I heard the man shift his weight, gravel moving under his shoe. I heard the woman's heartbeat, completely steady, completely professional, entirely unafraid. the heartbeat of someone who had been in dangerous situations many, many times before and had stopped having a physical fear response to them entirely. That specific kind of calmness is more frightening than anything loud or aggressive. It means the person has fully accepted whatever they're part of, no doubt left. "The Soren kid," the man said. My name. They said my actual name like it was an entry on a list of problems they were methodically working through. C rank, ear ability, he's been assigned to the Friday sweep team. Another pause. Not a long one, short and decisive. "Handle it." That was all. 2 words. "Handle it." Said in the same tone you'd use to ask someone to deal with a scheduling conflict or a broken piece of office equipment. Completely flat. I stood on that sidewalk for another few seconds. My own heartbeat was loud in my ears. Louder than I was comfortable with. More honest than I wanted to hear. Then I turned around and walked back toward the branch. Calmly. No running. No looking toward the alley. Just walking like someone heading home from paperwork. Because the single most important thing about knowing what other people are planning is making absolutely certain they have no idea that you know it yet. I had until Friday. And I intended to use every single second of that time. Starting right now. Starting tonight. Starting with everything I already knew. My name is Kai Soren. I'm a C-rank hunter with an ability that everyone in my branch spent the first month calling a party trick. And I had just overheard 2 people calmly discussing what to do about me before I could interfere with something they very badly needed to stay hidden. The funny thing about having the best hearing in the room, or in this case, in a 3-block radius, is that people forget to account for you. They look at the rank. They see C. They think about what C rank means in terms of firepower and speed and raw combat ability. They make their calculation. They decide you're not a threat worth taking seriously. And then they have their private conversations at what they believe is a completely safe distance. I had been underestimated since the day I walked into that clinic. Since the day the readout said C and the technician said good hearing like it was an apology. I had been underestimated by every hunter in that common room on my first day. By Brock with his party trick comment. By Sarah with her easy dismissal. I had been underestimated by every monster that assumed the quiet guy in the back of the team was the least dangerous person in the formation. Wrong, every time. And now I was being underestimated by whoever those 2 people in the alley were. By the mole inside my own branch who thought they were invisible. The pattern was becoming very clear to me as I walked back through the empty nighttime streets toward the branch building and its warm interior lights. Being underestimated was not a disadvantage I was fighting against. It was an advantage I was accumulating. Every person who dismissed me added to it. Every person who said, "party trick," and turned back to their cards. Every person who assigned me boring paperwork runs. Every person who didn't bother to whisper quietly enough. They were all giving me something. They just didn't know it yet. And I had absolutely no intention of explaining it to them until the exact right moment. Friday was 4 days away. I had 4 days to figure out what was being smuggled through that gate, who was involved, and what handle it meant for me personally. 4 days to do it quietly, without tipping anyone off, without letting the mole in my branch realize that I knew there was a mole in my branch. I pushed open the door to the Valen branch building. The front desk person looked up and nodded. I nodded back. Normal. Just another C rank coming back from an errand. I walked past the common room where a few hunters were still up late playing cards and arguing about something. Normal sounds, normal rhythms. I went to my desk and sat down and stared at the surface of it for a long moment. Thinking, organizing, laying out everything I had just learned in careful order. 1. There was a smuggling operation running through a gate in my district. Something was being moved that couldn't go through official channels. 2. Someone inside the Valen branch was facilitating it. Making sure the right search patterns missed the right areas at the right times on the right nights. 3. I had been assigned to the Friday sweep team, which meant either someone had made a mistake or someone was planning to make sure I wasn't a problem. Handle it. I kept coming back to those 2 words. They were so clean and so vague, and they covered a very wide range of possible meanings. It could mean get him reassigned. It could mean create a distraction. It could mean something that I preferred not to think about too directly at that moment. What it definitely meant was that my presence on that Friday team had been noticed by people who had resources, and an insider and very little apparent hesitation. I pulled up the assignment roster on my tablet. Friday sweep team, myself, Brock, Sarah, and 2 other B ranks I had worked with twice before named Cole and Asha. I looked at the list. 5 names. One of them might be the mole. None of them looked like a mole on paper. Moles never do, that's the entire point. I put the tablet down, leaned back in my chair, extended my hearing out through the building, slow and methodical, just checking, just taking inventory. Brock in the card room, heartbeat steady and unbothered. Sarah had already gone home for the night. The front desk person reading something quietly. A few others, all normal rhythms. All familiar bass lines that I had spent weeks cataloging without anyone knowing I was doing it. Everything exactly where it should be. I let my hearing drift further, out through the walls of the branch building, out into the street, sweeping slowly through the surrounding blocks in all directions. The two voices from the alley were gone. Of course they were. They'd said what they needed to say and moved on. Professional, clean, no lingering. But they had said my name. They knew my name and my ability and my assignment. That meant they had access to branch information. That meant the mole was real and active. I started making a mental list, not of suspects, not yet. I didn't have enough to go on for suspects. Just a list of what I needed to find out before Friday. What was being moved through the gate, which specific gate in the district it was coming through, what secondary loading zone meant in the context of our search patterns. And most importantly, who inside the branch had access to team assignment schedules and search route information and the willingness to trade that access for something. 4 days. I was going to need every single hour of them, and I was going to need to be invisible while I used them. No one could know I was looking. The moment whoever was on the inside realized I knew something was wrong, they would pull the operation or pull me out of the equation. Possibly both. So I was going to be the most boringly normal C-rank hunter in the history of the Valen branch for the next 4 days, filing reports, running errands, staying quiet. And underneath that, in the space that nobody thought to monitor because nobody thought I was worth monitoring, I was going to learn absolutely everything. That was the advantage. That was the thing nobody had figured out yet about an ability like mine. It worked best when nobody knew it was working at all. I closed the tablet, pushed back from the desk, stood up and stretched like a guy who'd had a long, boring day and was ready to go get some sleep. Walked out of the branch building into the cool night air, looked up at the sky for a moment the way anyone might look up at the sky on a clear night. Somewhere up there, invisible until they chose not to be, the gates existed. Waiting. Always waiting. Moving things back and forth across a boundary nobody fully understood. And somewhere inside that system, someone had decided that a C-rank hunter with good ears was a problem that needed to be handled before Friday. I smiled at the sky. A small smile. The kind that doesn't mean you find something funny. The kind that means you've decided something and you're at peace with it. Then I put my hands in my pockets and walked home through the quiet streets and started planning in earnest because I had 4 days and not a single one to waste. If you thought good hearing was the most useless ability a hunter could get, stick around, because Kai is about to make every single doubter regret that opinion. The first time I really understood what my ability could do, I mean truly understood it, not just in theory, was about a week before the warehouse incident. It was a Tuesday, and I was sitting alone in the branch cafeteria at 6 in the morning because I couldn't sleep and coffee existed, and those two facts aligned. The cafeteria was empty except for me and one other person, a senior hunter named Marcus, who I'd spoken to exactly twice before, and both times briefly. Marcus was a B rank, been at the branch for 3 years, solid reputation, never caused problems. The kind of person you didn't think about much because nothing made you. He was sitting at a table on the far side of the room with a cup of coffee and his phone in what looked like a perfectly ordinary early morning. I wasn't paying special attention to him. I was reading something on my own phone, hearing dialed back to comfortable range, just existing in the quiet. Then his heartbeat changed, subtle. The kind of change that meant nothing if you weren't specifically calibrated to notice it. I noticed it immediately. His rhythm had been steady and slow, the way it is when someone's tired and half present. Then it spiked, held elevated for about 8 seconds, then slowly settled. He'd read something on his phone that scared him. Not the startled kind of scared. Something had activated a controlled fear response, practiced suppression. I kept my eyes on my own phone and extended my hearing toward him carefully. He'd set his phone face down on the table and was staring at his coffee. His breathing had changed too. Slower now, deliberately paced. The breathing of someone talking themselves back from the edge of a reaction they couldn't afford. I didn't do anything with that. I had no context. I had no reason to assume anything sinister. People got bad news on their phones at 6 in the morning all the time. But I filed it. I noted the exact pattern of it, the specific texture of that controlled fear response, and I stored it in the mental catalog I was building. 3 days later, Marcus was on a gate monitoring shift with Brock and 2 others. A simple sweep, nothing unusual. They came back and filed the report. Routine, clean. No incidents. I read the report because I read all the reports that came through, just to know what was happening in the district. But when Marcus briefed it aloud in the common room, his heartbeat did the same thing. That same controlled spike, that same deliberately paced breathing after. He was afraid of something connected to that gate zone, afraid in a way he was working very hard not to let anyone see. Nobody was looking at him closely enough to notice, nobody except me, and I still didn't have enough to know what it meant. But it stayed in the catalog, clearly labeled. waiting for more context to arrive. Context arrived on the night I stood on that sidewalk and heard my name come out of an alley in the voice of a man I'd never met before. After I heard that conversation, I walked back to the branch, and I pulled up the assignment records for the past 6 months, and I cross-referenced them. Marcus had been on the sweep team for the same gate zone 3 times in the past 4 months. Each time he'd signed off on a clean report. No incidents. I sat with that information for a long time. Then I put the tablet away and went home because I needed sleep more than I needed to spiral about things I couldn't yet prove. The next morning I woke up early and ran. Not because I was a runner, I was not, but because moving helped me think, and I had a great deal to think about. 4 miles through the warehouse district while the city was still mostly quiet, my hearing sweeping passively as I ran, collecting ambient data out of habit. I ran past the alley where I'd heard the 2 voices the night before. Slowed slightly, no one there now. Just a normal alley between 2 normal warehouse buildings. But I noted the exact location. The angle from the main street, the distance from the branch building, approximately how far from the administrative office. Someone had chosen that specific spot for that specific conversation deliberately. It was far enough from foot traffic to feel private, but not far enough, not even close. I kept running. By the time I got back to my apartment and showered and changed, I had the beginning of a structure. Not a plan yet, just a structure. I knew what I needed to find out. I knew I had 4 days. I knew I had to appear completely normal while doing it. Those 3 things formed the skeleton. Everything else was going to have to be built carefully, piece by piece, using only what I could gather through a sense that nobody was accounting for. That afternoon, I went back to the branch for the regular afternoon briefing, sat in my usual seat, listened to the usual reports, looked bored in my usual way. But underneath that, I was listening to every heartbeat in that room with a level of focus I'd never applied in a group setting before. Baseline check on everyone. Brock, steady, slightly elevated aggression because someone had apparently gotten his coffee order wrong twice that week and he was still thinking about it. Sarah, fine, distracted. Her rhythm had the texture of someone working through a personal problem that had nothing to do with the work in front of her. Cole, who I'd be working with on Friday, normal, calm. The baseline of someone who had been doing this long enough that briefings genuinely did not raise his heart rate. Asha, slightly anxious. But Asha's baseline always ran a little high. She was one of those people who processed the world at a slightly elevated pace. Normal for her. Marcus, present, seated 2 rows ahead of me. I focused on his rhythm for a long moment, and then I had my answer, and I wished I didn't have it yet. His heartbeat was doing the thing. The controlled spike and settle, not constantly, intermittently. Every time the briefing touched on gate monitoring assignments. Every single time. Consistent enough to be a pattern. Specific enough to be meaningful. I looked at the back of his head and felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't want it to be Marcus. I'd spoken to him twice. I knew almost nothing about him. But I didn't want it to be anyone I'd had even 2 conversations with. That was the moment I understood that the information my ability gathered wasn't always going to be information I was going to be glad to have. Not even close. But I was going to have it anyway. Because not having it wasn't going to make the situation better. It was just going to make me less prepared for Friday. I looked back down at my briefing notes, wrote something unnecessary on the margin so it looked like I was paying close attention to the wrong things, and I kept listening. Because that was what I did now. That was who I was becoming in this role that everyone had assumed was going to be decorative at best. Not a party trick, not a novelty, not a C rank with good hearing, taking up space in a branch full of people who could actually do things in a fight. A hunter who knew things. A hunter who heard things that happened in dark alleys from 3 blocks away. A hunter who had 4 days and intended to use them. Handle it. 2 words. They echoed in the back of my mind during that entire briefing and during the rest of that day and well into the evening after. I had heard those words and I had turned around and walked calmly home, and I had slept and run and come back and sat in a chair and looked unremarkable. And the person who said those words had absolutely no idea that the problem they were trying to handle was already 3 steps ahead of them and listening. That was my advantage, the only one I needed. And I was going to ride it all the way to Friday, and whatever came after Friday and everything beyond that. Because underestimating me had become the most expensive mistake that anyone in my world kept making. And I had no intention of correcting them anytime soon. Thursday morning, 3 days before Friday, I woke up at 5 and lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling and running through everything I knew. Which wasn't much yet. A conversation in an alley, 2 voices, my name, a shipment, a mole, a deadline, and Marcus with his controlled fear response and briefings. Not enough to take to anyone, not even close to enough. What I had was a feeling and a pattern and a name that might mean nothing or might mean everything. What I needed was something concrete, something I could point to and say, Here, this is real. This is happening. This is what Friday actually is. I got up, made coffee, stood at my window and extended my hearing out into the morning city the way some people extend a hand to feel for rain. The district was waking up slowly, deliveries arriving at the warehouse buildings, early shift workers clocking in, and the distant hum of the city beginning its day. Nothing wrong, nothing out of place. Just the ordinary sounds of a world that had decided monsters falling out of the sky was now a normal Tuesday situation. I thought about the secondary loading zone, that specific phrase from the alley conversation. I knew our standard search patterns for the gate zone in question. I'd memorized them 2 weeks ago out of habit, the same way I memorized building layouts and shift schedules and anything else that helped me know my environment. The standard search covered the main loading bay, the east corridor, and 3 holding areas designated by protocol. Clean, thorough, well documented. What it didn't cover, now that I thought about it carefully, was the maintenance access level underneath the east corridor. Sub-level, below the standard sweep path. It wasn't in the official pattern because it had been decommissioned 18 months ago when the warehouse upgraded its systems. Officially sealed, officially empty, secondary loading zone. I was willing to bet a significant amount of money I didn't have that I was looking at the right location on the map in my head. I finished my coffee, put on my gear, went to the branch early and filed 2 forms that didn't urgently need filing, just to establish that I was there and normal. Then I went to the records room and pulled the maintenance logs for the warehouse complex near the gate zone. Old paper files. Nobody looked at paper files. The sublevel had been sealed 18 months ago following a structural assessment. Access restricted to authorized maintenance personnel only. 1 key existed. The key was logged out to the branch facilities coordinator 8 months ago for a routine check and logged back in the same day. Nothing unusual on the record, except that the login time was 4 hours after the logout time. A routine check of a sealed sublevel that took 4 hours, in a space with nothing in it. I put the file back exactly where I found it, walked out of the records room at a pace that communicated nothing except mild boredom. Normal? Routine? Invisible? Back at my desk, I wrote nothing down. I kept everything in my head where nobody could accidentally see it. That was becoming an important discipline. The facilities coordinator's name was Wen. I'd seen Wen maybe a dozen times since joining the branch. Friendly, efficient, completely unremarkable, like a good mole should be. I added Wen to my list of things to listen to carefully. Not accusations, just attention. The kind of attention that nobody knew I was paying to anything. That afternoon there was a joint briefing with the B-rank team leads. I wasn't supposed to be in it. C ranks didn't usually attend B-rank briefings, but I had a reason. I'd asked Sarah 2 days earlier if I could observe one of the higher level briefings for professional development purposes. She'd given me a look and then said, sure. People say yes to things that seem harmless. A C rank wanting to learn. A junior wanting to understand how the seniors operated. Completely harmless, obviously. I sat in the back of the briefing room and looked attentive and took notes on things that weren't what I was actually paying attention to. Very professional. What I was actually paying attention to was the room. Every heartbeat, every breathing pattern, every micro shift in rhythm when specific topics came up. The Friday sweep came up 12 minutes into the briefing. Standard item on the schedule. Nothing emphasized, nothing flagged, just another routine assignment. I watched the room. Brock, unchanged. Cole, unchanged. Asha, slight uptick, but that was her baseline anxious personality expressing itself on schedule. Normal. Marcus, sitting 2 seats to my left. I felt his rhythm change the moment the Friday sweep was mentioned. The spike, the controlled settling. Unmistakable. And across the table, someone else I hadn't been tracking closely enough. A senior hunter named Dev, 6 years at the branch. Quiet reputation, solid record. Dev's heartbeat did something when the Friday sweep came up. Different from Marcus. Not fear. Something more complicated. Anticipation mixed with calculation. 2 people in this room with abnormal responses to one specific agenda item. That was interesting. That was significantly more than I'd had yesterday morning. I kept my face neutral and my pen moving and my breathing steady. Wrote something meaningless in my notebook and underlined it for no reason whatsoever. The briefing ended. People filed out. I stayed behind to ask Sarah a follow-up question about search protocol formatting, which was the most boring question I could invent. While she was answering it, I was watching Dev walk down the corridor outside the glass wall of the briefing room. Watched his posture, watched his pace. He stopped near the water station at the end of the corridor, took out his phone. The angle was wrong for me to see the screen, but I didn't need to see the screen. I needed to hear his heartbeat while he was reading whatever was on it, and from 30 meters away through a glass wall, I could hear it perfectly clearly. He read something. His heartbeat spiked, differently from Marcus, more controlled, more deliberate, and then he put the phone away and walked on. Clean, practiced, 2 people, same operation, probably different roles, one scared, one calculating. That combination usually meant one was the inside access and one was the coordination. Marcus looked like fear. Dev looked like management. That was a guess. But my guesses had gotten significantly more accurate over the past month of practice. I thanked Sarah for the explanation about search protocol formatting. She gave me another look. She had a lot of different kinds of looks, and went back to her desk. I went back to my desk too and sat there for a while doing actual work, because I genuinely had actual work to do, and ignoring it would create the wrong impression. 2 more days, I had a location. I had 2 names, I had a pattern. I needed one more thing. I needed to know what was being moved through that sublevel on Friday. Because handle it could mean a lot of things, but the scale of what you're willing to handle tends to correspond directly to the value of what you're protecting. Whatever was coming through that gate on Friday was worth putting a mole inside a hunter branch for, worth coordinating with multiple people, worth removing obstacles, worth removing me, if it came to that. I kept that thought accessible, but not central. Dwelling on it wasn't useful. Understanding it as a parameter was. I stayed late that evening under the pretense of finishing a report. The branch gradually emptied. By 9, most people were gone. By 10, it was just me and the night staff. I extended my range, did a slow sweep of the building. The night staff member at the front desk, reading, relaxed, completely normal. Nobody else inside the building. I waited another 20 minutes. Then I walked casually to the corridor where the records room was, continued past it, and turned into the sub-level access stairwell. The facilities office was down here. Small room, mostly storage, for maintenance equipment and logistical documentation that didn't need to be upstairs with everyone else. I wasn't going to touch anything. I wasn't going to move anything. I just needed to know the space, to understand the layout, to hear if anything in it was wrong. The door was locked, which was normal. I stood outside it in the dim corridor and extended my hearing through the door and into the room beyond. Listened. Storage, boxes, a filing cabinet, the hum of a small dehumidifier running on a timer. Nothing unexpected, nothing out of place, nobody hiding in a corner. But on the desk inside, I could hear the faint electronic signature of a device. Something running on standby, something that shouldn't be in a facilities office at 10 at night. A secondary communicator, not the branch-issued kind. A personal device, kept here instead of taken home. Left in a locked room in a sublevel where nobody went. I stood in that corridor for a long moment. Then I turned around and walked back upstairs and finished my report and went home and got 4 hours of sleep. Thursday. That was Thursday. I'd learned more in 1 day of careful listening than I probably could have learned in a week of conventional investigation. Good. I needed 1 more day of the same. Friday would take care of itself if I had enough information walking into it. That was the plan. Simple, extremely stressful. Friday morning arrived the way important days always arrive. Exactly like every other morning. Completely indifferent to the significance you've attached to it. I woke up, made coffee, stood at the window, extended my hearing over the district in a slow sweep. Everything normal. Everything exactly where it should be. The sweep team was scheduled to assemble at the branch at 2 in the afternoon for a 4 o'clock start time at the gate zone. 6 hours away. Fine. I spent the morning doing the most normal things I could think of. Filed 2 more unnecessary forms. Read through protocol documents I'd already memorized. Went to the branch cafeteria at 11 and sat at a table by the window and ate a sandwich and looked like someone who had nothing unusual going on today. Marcus came in at 11:15. Got coffee. Sat alone at the table he usually sat at. His heartbeat was elevated. Had been since early morning, probably. He didn't look at me. I didn't look at him. We coexisted in that cafeteria for 20 minutes like 2 strangers with absolutely nothing connecting them. When he left, I kept eating my sandwich and looking out the window and listening to his footsteps recede down the corridor toward the briefing room area. He paused outside the facility's office stairwell, stood there for maybe 15 seconds. Then he walked on, not going down, just stopping, checking himself, continuing. That small hesitation told me more than a conversation would have. He was thinking about going down there, had stopped himself, was managing the impulse carefully. Whatever the plan was for today, Marcus was nervous enough about it to be making small, irrational decisions that he was then catching and correcting himself on. That was useful information. Nervous people made more mistakes than calm people. If Marcus was nervous today, he was more likely to be visible today. Good. At 1 o'clock, I went to the equipment room to check my gear for the sweep. Standard procedure. Nothing unusual about it. I just did it earlier than necessary. While I was there, Dev came in, also checking gear. We nodded at each other in the way you nod at someone you work alongside, but don't know particularly well. He went to his locker. I went to mine. We were on opposite sides of the room with a row of lockers between us. Normal distance, normal situation. His heartbeat was the calm and calculating one I'd identified in the briefing. Whatever role he played in this, he was not nervous about today. He was ready for it. That was the opposite of useful. Ready and calm meant prepared and in control. That was a harder variable to account for than nervous and making small mistakes. I finished checking my gear. Left the equipment room without looking back. Went to the common area and sat with a cup of bad coffee and waited for 2 o'clock. Brock arrived first, then Cole, then Asha, then Sarah. Then, a few minutes later, Dev, who was not on the sweep team but was apparently in the building for something. Marcus came in last, 2 minutes before 2. His heartbeat was doing the controlled spike and settle pattern on a loop now, every 30 seconds or so, consistent. The briefing was short. Sweep the standard zones, document any anomalies, report immediately if anything exceeded yellow class activity. Back by 9, standard. I listened to every word and watched every face and tracked every heartbeat and felt extremely calm in the way you feel calm when there's no longer anything left to decide. I had spent 2 days gathering information. I had a location. I had names. I had a pattern. I knew what the secondary loading zone was and where it sat. What I didn't know was when exactly the shipment was moving, what it consisted of, and what handle it had been arranged to mean in practical terms. Those were the 3 variables I was walking into the gate zone without answers for. I had accepted that. You go with what you have when the clock runs out. We loaded into the transport vehicle at 2:15. 6 of us, me, Brock, Cole, Asha, Sarah, and Marcus. All C and B rank, all Valen branch, all regular. The drive to the warehouse district gate zone took 18 minutes. I spent those 18 minutes with my hearing extended as wide as I could manage in the vehicle. Brock complaining about the route the driver took. Cole and Asha going over the search pattern together quietly. Sarah looking at her phone. Marcus breathing. Marcus was running a breathing exercise. The deliberate slow kind, the kind people use to keep themselves from showing what they're feeling. He was working hard at it. I looked out the window and let him have his privacy and filed the observation and thought about the sublevel and the sealed door and the secondary communicator. We arrived at the warehouse complex at 2:40, checked in with the gate authority, split into pairs for the initial sweep as per the standard protocol. Brock and Cole took the main loading bay. Asha and Sarah took the east corridor and 2 of the 3 holding areas. Marcus and I got the 3rd holding area. Marcus and I, paired together. I hadn't arranged that. I had been listed on the roster, but the specific pairing assignments were made by the team lead at deployment. The team lead for this sweep was Dev, who was not supposed to be on this sweep, but had apparently reassigned himself to the lead position this morning. I put that together in real time as we were walking through the warehouse complex, and I kept walking at exactly the same pace and showed absolutely nothing on my face. Dev had put Marcus with me. Dev was the coordination layer. Marcus was the inside access, and Dev had just paired the nervous inside man with the problem to be handled. That was what handle it meant. Not reassignment, not distraction. Marcus, today. In a holding area in the back of a warehouse where nobody would hear anything, I walked beside Marcus through the corridor leading to the 3rd holding area and listened to his heartbeat and felt something cold and very clear settle over me. He was terrified. His rhythm was chaotic under the surface calm he was projecting. The breathing exercises weren't helping anymore. He was past that threshold. He didn't want to do whatever he was here to do. That was obvious. The fear was the kind that comes from being trapped in something you can't see a way out of. Someone had leverage on Marcus. That was what this felt like. Not ideology, not money. Leverage. The worst kind of recruitment because it left no clean exits. We reached the 3rd holding area. He took out his scanner and started the sweep documentation. Normal procedure, correct equipment, correct sequence, covering his tracks. I started my own documentation on the other side of the room, moving slowly through the space and extended my hearing outward in every direction simultaneously. Below us, down through the floor, the sublevel. I pushed my hearing down through the concrete and the old piping and the dehumidified darkness below. Heartbeats, 3 of them, steady and quiet. Professionals who were waiting with the patience of people who'd done this many times before and knew how it went. And something else. Not a heartbeat. A sound I hadn't expected and couldn't immediately identify. Low and rhythmic and biological in a way that made my skin react before my brain caught up. Something alive down there. Not human. Something larger than human. Something with a heartbeat that was slower and heavier than anything I'd heard before. Whatever was in that shipment was alive. That changed the calculation immediately and completely. This wasn't contraband materials or stolen equipment or black market items. Someone was moving a living creature through a sealed sublevel under a Hunter Branch sweep zone. Something large enough to have a heartbeat I could feel through the floor. I kept my scanner moving and my face completely neutral and my breathing controlled and thought about that for exactly the amount of time I could afford to think about it. Marcus was moving toward me across the holding area, too directly. The search pattern didn't require him to cross to my side of the room yet. He knew that. His heartbeat had gone into a different register. Not fear anymore. The specific resignation of someone who has decided to do the thing they'd been dreading. I turned to face him before he was close enough to think he had the element of surprise. Looked at him directly, said nothing. Just looked at him and waited. He stopped. About 4 meters away. His hand was near the secondary utility blade at his belt, not touching it yet, just near it. His eyes were doing something complicated. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was quieter than I'd heard it before, the voice of someone talking through concrete in their chest. "I don't have a choice, Kai." I looked at him. "Who is your sister?" I said. Because I'd been listening to him for 2 days, and I knew it was something like that. A person, someone specific. His face went completely still, the kind of still that means you've hit something true and the person hadn't been prepared to have it hit that precisely or that quickly. "How did you—" he started. Stopped. Looked at me like I was something he was only now seeing clearly for the first time, despite weeks of working in the same building. "You've been scared since before I joined the branch," I said. "Not general scared. A specific fear? The kind that has a name and an address attached to it?" He was very quiet for a moment. His hand had moved away from the blade. I noticed that. It was the most important thing that had happened in the last 30 seconds. "She's been missing for 2 months, he said. "They have her somewhere. They said they'd—" He stopped. His heartbeat was doing something that I didn't have a word for. "What do they need from you tonight specifically?" I asked. "Not what happened, not the full story. What do they need? Tonight, right now, the immediate variable." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "They need the sub-level access for 3 more hours, and they need the sweep report to show this area clean. 3 more hours. The 3 people waiting in the sub-level with whatever was alive in that shipment needed 3 more hours to complete their transfer. And they needed Marcus to make sure the sweep report showed nothing, so that those 3 hours existed without any official intervention. Clean paper trail." "What happens to your sister if the sweep finds something?" I asked. I already knew the answer. I needed him to say it. Saying it mattered for what came next. He didn't say it. His heartbeat said it instead, in a language I'd been learning to read for a month, the language of someone who had run out of bearable options. I stood in that holding area and looked at Marcus and thought about the 3 heartbeats below us and the slower, heavier one that didn't belong to any human. And I made a decision. Not the careful 2 days of planning kind, the immediate kind, the kind that comes from having all the information available and no more time. "You're going to file the sweep report showing this area clean," I said, exactly as they asked you to. Marcus stared at me. His whole face was confused. "And then you're going to tell me everything you know about where your sister is," I said. "Every detail, every location they mentioned, every name you heard." "Why would you help me with this?" he started, his voice dropping lower than before. I cut him off before he could finish building the question into something bigger. "Because 3 hours is enough time for me to do something about both problems if I move right now," I said. "And because you're not the enemy here, you're a hostage." Marcus stared at me for a long time. His heartbeat was doing something I'd never heard before from him, something that took me a moment to identify. Relief. The specific, devastating relief of someone who has been holding everything alone for 2 months and has just been offered a hand by someone unexpected. "The facility is in the industrial zone on the north side," he said. His voice was low and fast now. "Building 7, sub-basement. They have 2 people there." I listened to every word and committed it perfectly to the catalog that my ability had been building since the moment I first understood what it could do. "File the report," I said. "Then go back to the branch and wait, and don't contact anyone. Not Dev, not anyone connected to this. Just wait." He nodded. I left the holding area and walked down the corridor at a normal pace. Then I found a quiet corner and took out my communicator and made a call. Not to the branch, not to Dev, obviously. I called the District Hunter Authority emergency line, the one that bypassed branch command and went directly to oversight. I gave them the sub-level location, the 3 operatives, the living shipment, the building on the north side. Everything I had in clean, organized sentences. Then I put the communicator away and went back to finish my section of the sweep documentation. Clean. Thorough. Every zone except the sub-level, exactly as assigned. Because the district authority didn't need me to handle the sub-level, they had people for that. What they needed was the information. I had provided the information. That was my job. That was what I was for. Not the firepower, not the dramatic confrontation. The information, gathered quietly, delivered precisely, at the right moment. The sweep concluded at 7. We filed back into the transport. Dev was already gone. He'd left the building 30 minutes earlier, which told me he'd gotten a signal. Either the transfer had completed ahead of schedule, or someone had warned him. Either way, he was gone. That was a variable I hadn't been able to control. I noted it. On the drive back, Brock was complaining about the route again. Cole and Asha were debriefing quietly. Sarah was on her phone. Marcus was looking out the window. I looked out my own window at the city moving past in the dark and thought about a warehouse sub-level and a heartbeat too slow and heavy to be human. And I thought about what gets moved through sealed maintenance corridors under Hunter sweep zones. Alive in the middle of the night, protected by moles and leverage and careful planning. I didn't have that answer yet. The district authority would find what was in the sublevel when they moved in. I would learn what it was when they filed their report. What I knew was this. It was big enough to justify putting someone inside a hunter branch for months. Big enough to justify leverage against a hunter's family. Big enough to make two professionals sit in a dark sublevel for hours waiting with the patience of people who believed completely in what they were transporting. Whatever it wasn't the end of something. Everything about the structure of this operation felt like a piece of something larger. A node in a network. And somewhere in that network was the woman with the cold, precise voice who had said, "Handle it in an alley," and expected it to simply be done. Like a scheduling conflict. I had been the scheduling conflict. I was still here, and she didn't know that yet. Didn't know that the sweep had gone exactly as planned except for the part where I'd been planning too. That thought settled somewhere in my chest in a way that felt like the beginning of something rather than the end of it, which was accurate. It was absolutely the beginning. The transport pulled back into the branch parking area. Everyone climbed out. Normal end to a normal sweep. That was what it looked like from the outside. I filed my section of the documentation. Said goodnight to Brock, who grunted, and to Cole, who nodded, and to Asha, who was already on her phone. Walked home through the warehouse district, same route as the night I'd stood on the sidewalk and heard my name come out of an alley in the dark. Extended my hearing out of habit, sweeping slowly, taking inventory of the night, the city settling into itself, distant traffic, somewhere a dog barking, and from the north side of the district, much further than I usually reached, a sound, movement. The controlled, efficient movement of professional people doing something quickly. The district authority had moved in. They'd found the sublevel. They were in there right now, and from the rhythm of what I could barely make out at this distance, from the rhythm and the pace and the specific quality of organized professional action, it sounded like they'd found exactly what I'd told them they would find. I lowered my hearing back to comfortable range, put my hands in my pockets, kept walking home, felt the night air on my face and thought about Marcus's sister in a sub-basement. And I thought, two problems. I said I would do something about two problems tonight. The sublevel was the district authorities now. Building 7 was still mine. I stopped walking. Stood on the sidewalk in the dark. Thought about it carefully for approximately 30 seconds, which was all the time I was going to give it. Then I turned north, away from my apartment, toward the industrial zone and Building 7 and a sub-basement where two people were guarding something they shouldn't be. I was a C-rank hunter. I had good ears. I had a plan that was approximately 60% formed and 40% going to have to figure itself out in real time. And I had something else. Something the people in Building 7 were not going to be accounting for when a quiet, unremarkable C rank with a low damage ability showed up. They weren't going to be accounting for the fact that I could hear everything they did before they did it. Every breath, every heartbeat, every shift of weight and change of grip, half a second of warning in every possible direction, at all times, against people who didn't know I had it. That wasn't a party trick. That was an absolute advantage. I walked north through the city and felt the night air and extended my hearing wide and kept adding to the plan with every block that passed under my feet. Marcus's sister was going home tonight. That was the only part of the plan that I was completely certain about. Everything else was variable. That part was not. If you think a C rank is walking into a two-person guarded sub-basement and coming out the other side, drop a comment, because this is exactly where it gets interesting. Building 7 was a converted logistics facility on the industrial north side. I'd never been there, but I knew the district map well enough to navigate it. 12 minutes of walking got me to the edge of the industrial zone. I slowed down, extended my hearing to maximum range in every direction, swept carefully. 2 guards outside, Building 7. Around the back, near what the map in my head placed as the service entrance. Both stationary, both alert but not tense. They weren't expecting anything tonight. The sublevel operation was supposed to be going smoothly. Dev had left before anything went wrong from his perspective. As far as everyone in this network was currently aware, the sweep had gone exactly as planned. Marcus had done his part. The transfer was completing, everything clean, which meant the people guarding Marcus's sister were operating under the assumption that this was a quiet holding night. No problems, no interference incoming. I stopped on the street outside the block that contained Building 7, listened carefully for another full minute, cataloged everything I could identify. 2 outside, the 2 inside the sub-basement that Marcus had mentioned. A 5th person, I found this one slower, on the 2nd floor, near a window, watching the street. 5 total, not 2. Marcus had said 2, but Marcus didn't have full information about the operation. He knew his part. He didn't know the whole structure. 5 against 1 C rank with good ears and a plan that was now going to need some revision. I took that in calmly, revised the plan, kept walking. Here is what I had in my favor going into Building 7, with 5 unknown rank opponents and no backup. I knew exactly where all of them were at all times. The 2 outside were on the south side of the building. I came in from the north. Maintenance access, same instinct as before. Old buildings always had maintenance access. The The north wall had a utility door, locked. I crouched beside it and extended my hearing through it. Storage corridor on the other side, empty, nobody near it. I didn't have a key. What I had was a month of handling standard issue hunter gear, including the electromagnetic pulse tool that every field hunter carried for gate equipment. Gate equipment ran on the same frequency bands as most commercial locks in buildings that had been retrofitted for security after the gates appeared. Convenient. The door clicked open. I went in, closed it behind me, stood in the dark storage corridor and breathed slowly and mapped the building by sound as quickly as I could. The fifth person on the second floor, moving slowly, regular patrol pattern, not expecting anything. The two outside, still stationary. The two in the sub-basement, still waiting. And below the sub-basement, heartbeats. A third presence I'd found on my walk over, smaller than the thing in the warehouse sublevel. Human-sized, but wrong somehow. Marcus's sister was alive. That was the important data point. She was alive and on the lower level, and her heartbeat was the specific elevated rhythm of sustained fear. Not immediate danger. Sustained. The rhythm of someone who had been afraid for a long time and had stopped expecting it to end. That specific, exhausted kind. I moved through the storage corridor toward the stairwell that my internal map said should be at the north end of the building. It was exactly where I expected it. Down one level, sub-basement. The door at the bottom was heavier than the one upstairs, industrial grade, not a lock that my standard gear was going to handle. I stood at the bottom of the stairwell and listened through the door. The two guards were on the far side of the room from where the captive heartbeat was coming from. They were talking, low voices, easy tone. The conversation of people who were bored and comfortable and had been sitting in a room for several hours with nothing happening. I listened to their conversation for a moment, not for content. It was logistical small talk, meaningless. I was listening to their rhythms, their patterns, their attention. Neither of them was facing the door. I could tell by the direction their voices were projecting, both facing toward the center of the room, away from the entrance. I didn't have a way through that door that didn't make noise, which meant noise was going to happen, and I needed to use the half-second advantage before they oriented. I stepped back from the door, thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Then I hit the door handle with the full electromagnetic pulse at maximum output. The lock didn't click. It sparked and seized, and then the whole door swung inward from the pressure behind the mechanism failing. Loud, definitive, committed. Both guards spun toward the door. I heard them moving before the door had fully swung open. Half a second. I already knew exactly where they were and which way they were facing. I came through the door low and moving to the left, away from the guard on the right who was closer, and put my full momentum into the one on the left. He was reaching for something at his hip. I heard his shoulder rotating before his hand made it. I got inside the motion and drove my elbow into his sternum. The air went out of him. He folded. The guard on the right had completed his turn and was moving toward me now, faster than I'd wanted, better trained than I'd hoped. But I heard him. Every footfall. The way his weight shifted right before he committed to a direction. That half second of warning in close quarters is enormous. I dropped low as he came in, and he went over me partially, not cleanly, and we both went down to the floor together in a way that was not elegant or planned. On the floor, I had the advantage. I'd spent 3 weeks working with the body control professor's basic curriculum, and floor positions were where that training lived. It took about 40 seconds. It felt longer. When I got up, both guards were down and my right hand was going to be bruised tomorrow, but was functional today. I straightened up and looked around the room for the first time with my actual eyes, instead of just my hearing. It was smaller than I'd pictured. One other door. Behind that door, the smaller heartbeat, the exhausted, afraid one. I walked over to it and knocked twice, which felt absurd given what had just happened, but still. My name is Kai Soren, I said, keeping my voice low. I work at the Valen branch. Marcus sent me. A silence, then a sound, then another silence. Marcus? Her voice was rough and quiet in the way voices get when someone has been in a small room without enough water for a long time. He did, I said. Can you walk? Another silence, shorter. Yes, she said. The door wasn't locked from my side. I opened it. She was in her mid-20s, same dark eyes as Marcus. She looked at me with the expression of someone whose brain was working extremely hard to process a change in situation. There are 3 more people in the building, I said quietly. We're going to go out the north corridor and walk north until we're out of the industrial zone. She looked at the 2 guards on the floor, looked at me, looked at my hand, which was not, I now noticed, in great shape. Then she nodded. We went out through the north corridor the way I'd come in. I went first, hearing extended ahead of us the entire time. The 5th person on the 2nd floor was still there, still facing the street. The 2 outside were still on the south side. We went out the north door and walked north, at a pace that was fast, but not running, because running attracted attention. After 2 blocks, I made the second call of the evening. Same district authority line. Building 7, sub-basement, 2 incapacitated guards, 2 more on the exterior. I gave them the location and disconnected and kept walking north with Marcus's sister, who had been in a sub-basement for 2 months and hadn't yet asked me a single question. That was either shock or discipline or both. I wasn't going to make her talk before she was ready. We just walked. I kept my hearing wide. Nothing followed us. 6 blocks from the industrial zone, I flagged a transport and sent her to the district medical authority, hunter liaison staff, not a standard ER. I watched it pull away. Then I turned and started walking south, back toward the part of the city where people were sleeping and not thinking about any of this. I watched the transport pull away down the empty industrial street. Then I turned and started walking back south toward the part of the city I actually lived in. I watched the transport drive away, stood on the sidewalk, extended my hearing one more time in a wide sweep. Nothing wrong, nothing following. Night sounds, city sounds. I started walking home. My hand was definitely going to be worse tomorrow. My report for the sweep was filed. The district authority had 2 locations to process tonight. Dev was in the wind. The woman from the alley was still out there. Whatever had been in that sublevel was now in the authorities' custody, and I'd find out what it was when they released a report. The network that had put Marcus in my branch, and leverage on his sister, and a living shipment through a sealed sublevel was still operating. This had been one node. I walked home through the city and felt the night air and thought about nodes and networks and the cold, precise voice of a woman I'd never seen who said, "Handle it." She didn't know yet that she'd failed. Didn't know that the C rank she'd flagged as a problem to be handled had instead handled 4 of her people and recovered her leverage. She was going to find out. That was inevitable. And when she found out, the calculation she'd made about me was going to change significantly. I was counting on that. Because the moment someone stops underestimating you and starts taking you seriously is the moment the dynamic shifts. And I was very good at using shifting dynamics. I got home at midnight, made tea because I didn't want coffee, sat at my kitchen table and thought through the evening in careful order from beginning to end. Marcus, the sublevel, Building 7, the walk home, the 2 calls, Marcus's sister in a transport headed to people who could actually help her and protect her properly. 2 months she'd been in that room. 2 months Marcus had been carrying that alone inside a hunter branch, surrounded by colleagues who had no idea what he was going through. I sat with that for a while, not as a strategic variable, just as a fact about what people were capable of doing to each other when they wanted something badly enough. Then I put it away, filed it in the part of the catalog that wasn't about information, but about understanding. The part that explained why things happened the way they did. Understanding why was almost as useful as knowing what, usually more useful than knowing how. The how was mechanics. The why was the thing that told you what came next. What came next? Dev would surface somewhere. The woman from the alley had resources, and she would use them. The network would reassess and adapt and keep operating. And I would keep listening, keep cataloging, keep being the C rank with the party trick ability who wasn't worth accounting for until it was too late to account for me. That was the plan. Not dramatic, not fast. The slow accumulation of everything I could hear in a world that kept forgetting I was listening. That was enough. I finished my tea, went to bed. Lay in the dark, listening to the building settle and the city breathe, and somewhere very far north, the distant procedural sounds of authority people doing their jobs. And further than that, at the edge of my range, the city just being itself, loud and complicated and alive in the specific way that cities were alive, even in the middle of the night. I closed my eyes, let my hearing settle to comfortable range, let the sounds of the building fill the space instead of the sounds of the district and the industrial zone. My neighbor 3 doors down was asleep. The couple upstairs was asleep. The dog 2 streets away was quiet. Everything exactly where it should be, ordinary and safe. That was what I was doing all of this for. Not the rank, not the reputation, not proving anything to Brock or Sarah or anyone in that common room on my first day. This, the city being ordinary, the night being quiet. People sleeping without knowing that someone 2 blocks or 2 floors away was working to make sure the morning arrived. I fell asleep thinking about that. About the difference between being the person everyone saw and being the person who made sure the things nobody saw stayed handled. C rank, good ears, and apparently, as of tonight, a fairly specific set of skills that had nothing to do with firepower and everything to do with knowing more than anyone expected. That was enough. For now, tonight, in the city that kept going regardless of what moved through its sealed sublevels, that was more than enough. The district authority report came out 48 hours after Friday. I read it at my desk with a cup of coffee and a face that showed nothing at all. The sublevel had contained 3 operatives, all now in custody. Standard mercenary profiles. No gate-certified hunter licenses. Hired hands, not specialists. And the shipment. The living thing with the slow, heavy heartbeat that I'd heard through 2 floors of concrete. The report called it a Class B anomalous entity. Captured alive. species unknown. Biological characteristics consistent with gate origin fauna, but displaying cognitive behaviors not previously documented in any registry. In plain language, something had come through a gate that could think, not just hunt or react or follow instinct. Something that could plan, something that understood its situation. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I put the report down and looked at the wall for a moment and thought about what kind of operation required a thinking gate creature. Not a weapon you didn't need alive. Not a research subject you moved through official channels with proper documentation and oversight. Something you moved secretly through a sealed sublevel with moles and leverage and careful coordination was something whose existence you couldn't afford to officially report. That was a different category of problem. That was the kind of thing that sat at the top of a network, not the bottom. The expensive kind. The protected kind. I filed the information, kept my face normal, and went to the afternoon briefing, sat in my usual chair, listened to everything, and showed interest in nothing specific. Dev hadn't come back to the branch. His desk was there, his locker was there, his name was still on the roster. But Dev himself had been absent since Friday afternoon. Nobody was making a big deal of it yet. People went on temporary assignments, on personal leave, on regional deployments. An empty desk for a few days was unremarkable. It would become remarkable eventually. But right now it was just an empty desk, and I was going to let it stay unremarkable for as long as that served my purposes. Marcus had come back Monday morning, quieter than before, moved through the branch like someone who was still recalibrating what normal felt like after a long time without it. He hadn't looked at me directly until Tuesday. Then he had, in the corridor between the briefing room and the equipment area, and I'd nodded once, and he'd nodded back. That was the whole conversation. That was enough. He knew what I knew, and I knew what he knew, and neither of us had any reason to make it more complicated than that. His sister was at the medical authority facility, being assessed and processed, and given whatever support 2 months of that kind of situation required. She was safe. That was the thing that mattered. The rest of it, the operation, the network, Dev, the woman in the alley, was the thing that was going to take longer. That was fine. I'd learned something important in the week since Friday. The people running this network were patient. They'd placed Marcus in my branch months ago. They planned long, which meant responding to them quickly and dramatically was exactly the wrong approach. Quick and dramatic was what they expected from a hunter who'd stumbled into something. What they didn't expect was quiet, continued routine. A C-rank who apparently hadn't figured out that he'd walked through the edge of something much larger than a sub-level. I was going to be that C-rank for as long as I possibly could, right up until the moment when being that C-rank was no longer strategically useful. Then something else. 2 weeks after Friday, I got called into the branch director's office. Director Hana, compact, late 40s, A-rank combat record, 6 years running this branch, and 12 before that in the field. She had 0 patience for imprecision of any kind. Her heartbeat ran slow and even in the way trained fighters' heartbeats did. She looked at me across her desk and didn't say anything immediately. She'd been running the Valen branch for 6 years. Before that, she'd been field hunter for 12. Her heartbeat ran slow and even the way trained fighters' heartbeats did. She looked at me across her desk for a moment before saying anything. I looked back. Neither of us was in a hurry. That established something useful about the dynamic. The district authority contacted me about the Friday incident, she said. Both the sub-level and Building 7. She paused. They wanted to know who the tip came from. Well, what did you tell them? I asked. She smiled slightly. The smile of someone who had given a specific answer and was now interested in whether I'd confirm it. I told them it came from a C-rank hunter on the sweep team who had information that couldn't have been gathered through any standard method. She folded her hands on the desk. And they want to meet with you? She continued. District Authority Intelligence Division. Tomorrow morning. I'm telling you now so you can decide what you want to say. I thought about that. The Intelligence Division was different from the operational side that had moved into the sub-level in Building 7. Different mandate. Different questions. What do they know about my ability? I asked. Director Hana tilted her head slightly. The public registry listing. Enhanced auditory perception. C-rank classification. I nodded. Then I'll meet with them, I said. She looked at me for another moment. Then she said something I hadn't expected. You're not going to tell me how you knew, are you? Not yet, I said. She nodded once. Precise. The nod of someone filing that answer in an appropriate location for future reference. All right, she said. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. I stood up. She stopped me with one more thing. The Dev situation, she said. Off the record. I turned back. Her heartbeat had changed slightly, more careful. What about it? He had a family, she said quietly. Wife? A daughter? They haven't been contacted about his absence yet because officially he's on extended personal leave. She paused. I need to know if that's going to change, she said. Not asking me to investigate. Not assigning me anything. just telling me a fact and watching what I did with it. Dev had a family. The man who had coordinated the leverage against Marcus's sister and arranged to have me handled on a Friday sweep had a wife and a daughter. That information settled into the catalog alongside everything else, not as sympathy, not as judgment, and as a variable. Everything was a variable until it wasn't. "I'll let you know if I learn anything relevant," I said. She nodded again. I left her office and walked back to my desk and sat down and thought for a long time. Dev's family, Marcus's sister, the thinking creature in the sublevel, the woman in the alley, these were not separate threads, they were all part of the same cloth. The question was where the cloth was being woven. That was what I didn't know yet. I knew individual nodes. I didn't know the center. I didn't know the purpose. I spent that evening not at the branch and not at home. I walked. Long, slow, extended circuits through the district with my hearing pushed out as far as it would reach, not looking for anything specific. Just listening to the city, learning its rhythms, getting a more complete picture of what normal sounded like so abnormal would stand out more clearly. The industrial zone was quiet now. Building 7 had been processed and sealed. The gate zone near the warehouse district had been elevated to orange classification after the Friday incident. Orange meant increased monitoring. Increased monitoring meant more hunters in the area on a rotation basis, more heartbeats to catalog, more baselines to establish. I spent 2 hours in the vicinity of the elevated gate zone, walking slowly, not stopping anywhere long enough to look like I was doing anything specific. What I was doing was learning who was now in that area, who had been assigned to the increased monitoring rotation, who was there for legitimate reasons and who wasn't. Most of them were legitimate. 5 hunters from 2 different branches, rotating through shifts, doing the job with the professional competence of people who knew the area. But at the edge of my range, at the outer limit of what I could reliably separate from background noise, something that didn't belong to the monitoring rotation, one person, standing still in a position that had a clear sight line to the gate zone without being inside the perimeter, watching, not moving for a very long time. I changed my walking route, slow arc, maintaining distance, bringing the person gradually into better range while looking like someone taking a long evening walk for no particular reason. Closer. The heartbeat came in clearer, controlled, professional, the slow, deliberate rhythm of someone who had been in surveillance positions many times before and was comfortable in them. Not a hunter. No standard equipment frequency in the area. No branch identification signals on the monitoring network. Just a person watching a gate zone from outside the perimeter. I got as close as I could without entering their sight line. Extended my hearing to maximum focus. Tried to separate any other sounds from the one I wanted. They were on a communicator. Earpiece, low volume, receiving rather than transmitting. One-sided. Someone talking to them from somewhere else entirely. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation. Too far. Too attenuated. But I could hear the watcher's side, which wasn't words, just listening, just presence. Except for one moment. One response to something said in the earpiece. Brief. 3 words. Said so quietly they were almost below my ability to resolve. Almost. He's still useful. That was what they said. He's still useful. In the voice of someone confirming something they'd already assessed and were simply reporting his current status. He's still useful. Present tense. Active assessment. Someone in this network was monitoring the situation and making ongoing determinations about someone's continued value. The he could be Marcus. The he could be Dev, wherever Dev currently was. The he could be the thinking creature in district authority custody. It could be me. I stood in my walking path and breathed normally and filed that phrase and the voice that had said it and the exact heartbeat rhythm that had accompanied it. Then I continued my walk, completed the circuit, went home, made tea, sat at the kitchen table and arranged everything I knew into the most coherent structure I could build. The network had multiple layers, operational people like the 3 in the sublevel, coordination people like Dev, intelligence people like the Watcher by the gate zone, and above those layers, the person in the alley, the woman with the cold, precise voice and the steady professional heartbeat who said, handle it like a scheduling note. She wasn't the top either. People with that kind of resource base, moles and hunter branches, operatives and sublevels, watchers by gate zones, reported to something. I didn't know what that something was yet. I knew I was going to find out, because the alternative was waiting for them to make another decision about my continued usefulness. He's still useful implied that usefulness was a temporary assessment subject to revision. I preferred to find out what I was being assessed for before that revision happened. The next morning I met with the District Authority Intelligence Division. A man named Rael and a woman named Cho, both in civilian clothes, both with hunter-registered abilities. Rael was a B-rank analyst, information processing ability. He could read and retain documents at extreme speed and cross-reference them in real time, useful for their work. Cho was higher, A rank. Her ability was listed in the registry as probability assessment. She looked at me when I sat down the way people looked at complicated math problems. "We've reviewed the Friday incident," Rail said. He had a folder. He opened it but didn't look at it, looking at me instead. "We have some questions about methodology." I told them what I told them. Not everything. The relevant portions, organized in a way that explained the outcomes without fully explaining the process. A careful, partial truth. I told them I'd heard suspicious communication near the branch building and followed up by reviewing access records and identifying anomalies in the sweep pattern documentation. True. All of it true. Just not complete. I didn't mention the 2 full days of systematic heartbeat monitoring, the catalog, the depth of real-time information I'd had going into Friday. Cho was watching me while Rail asked the questions. Her heartbeat was doing something I hadn't encountered before. A steady, very slow rhythm that felt almost like calculation. Probability assessment. She was running something while she sat there, looking at me and running some kind of assessment of the probabilities associated with my answers. I kept my own heartbeat deliberate and steady. Not because I was lying, I wasn't, but because I was being selective, and selectiveness and deception read differently if you knew what to listen for. She knew what to listen for. I could tell by the way her rhythm shifted when I answered specific questions, adjusting her assessment in real time based on what she was reading. Interesting. I was being assessed by someone with a perception ability while trying not to fully reveal the extent of my own perception ability. This was a specific kind of challenge. "Your ability listing says enhanced auditory perception," Cho said. First thing she'd said since we sat down. "C rank classification." She paused. "Is that accurate?" "That's what the awakening test registered," I said. Completely true. The awakening test had registered exactly that. What it hadn't fully measured was the operational ceiling. She looked at me for a moment. Then, "The range at which you gathered the information you've described exceeds the documented performance parameters for C rank hearing abilities." I looked back at her. "Abilities develop with practice," I said. "I've been practicing." Also completely true. Also not the full picture. She knew that. Her heartbeat said she knew that. "We'd like to run a formal assessment," Rail said, back into the folder now. "Range, precision, and specificity metrics. It would help us understand what we're working with." I thought about that for a moment. A formal assessment meant documentation. Documentation meant an updated registry entry. An updated entry meant the network would see it. If my ability got officially reevaluated and re-ranked, the watcher by the gate zone and whoever they reported to would have access to that information. Within days. He's still useful. That assessment was based on what they currently believed I could do. Changing what was in my registry entry would change their calculation, unpredictably. "I'd prefer to delay the formal assessment," I said. Rail looked up from the folder. Cho's probability rhythm shifted again. "For how long?" Rail asked. "Until the network that ran the Friday operation has been more fully mapped," I said. "A reevaluation of my ability right now tells them things I don't want them to know yet." A silence. Rail looked at Cho. Cho looked at me with a specific expression of someone whose probability assessment had just landed on an outcome they found genuinely interesting. "You're running a counterintelligence approach," she said. Not a question. "Using your current under-evaluation as operational cover." She paused. "That's a sophisticated read." "C ranks have to think differently," I said. She almost smiled. Almost. Her heartbeat had settled into something new. A rhythm I cataloged as professional respect, careful and measured. Rail closed the folder. "We'll hold the formal assessment," he said. "In exchange, we'd like ongoing information sharing. Anything relevant to the Friday network. Direct channel, no branch intermediary." That was what I'd wanted. A direct line to the intelligence division that bypassed branch command, which still had an unknown quantity in it given that Dev had been positioned there. "Agreed," I said. We exchanged secure contact information. I stood up. Cho stood with me, which surprised me slightly. She walked me to the door. At the door, she stopped me with a hand briefly on my arm, low enough that Rail, still gathering his folder, wouldn't catch it. She said very quietly, "The watcher near the gate zone last night." My heartbeat did something. Not much, but something. And she caught it. I could tell by the small adjustment in her probability rhythm. "You already knew," she said, even quieter. "I heard them," I said. "Same volume." She looked at me for one more second. Then she stepped back and said at normal volume, "Thank you for coming in, Hunter Sorn." That was all. I walked out of the intelligence division building into the morning sunlight and stood on the steps for a moment. Cho knew about the watcher. The division had been monitoring the gate zone area. They'd identified the surveillance independently. They just hadn't known that I'd identified it too. Now they did, and Cho was already running updated calculations based on the new data point I just handed her. A C rank whose hearing exceeded documented parameters, who had run a 2-week counterintelligence operation inside his own branch, who had emerged from it with an intelligence contact and a confirmed network asset in place. That was the updated picture Cho was now working with. I genuinely wondered what probability Cho was assigning to me at that specific moment. Whatever number it was, I suspected it had moved significantly upward. I wondered what probability she was assigning to me, what outcome she'd calculated, what variable I represented in whatever larger picture she was building. I wondered what probability she was assigning to me specifically, what outcome she'd calculated, what variable I represented in whatever larger picture she was working from. I'd find out eventually. Everything came out eventually when you were patient enough and listening carefully enough. That was the central lesson of the past 3 weeks. I went back to the branch, filed a routine report, sat at my desk, extended my hearing through the building in a slow, familiar sweep. Everything in its usual place, except one thing. Marcus's desk, 2 rows ahead of mine, had a different quality to it today. His rhythm was different, not the controlled fear from before. Something new. He was making a decision. I could hear it in the specific tension of his breathing, the way his heartbeat sat at a slightly elevated rate without spiking. Deliberate consideration. At lunch, he came and sat across from me in the cafeteria without being invited, which was the first time he'd done that. He had a coffee, and he looked at it for a moment. "They're going to come back," he said. "The people who had my sister, they're going to need to reestablish their position in this branch after losing Dev." He looked up. "They'll approach someone else," he said. "Different leverage, different person, but same method." He paused. "I know what the early approach looks like. I lived through it." I looked at him across the cafeteria table. His heartbeat was the steady kind that meant he'd already made the decision and was now just stating its conclusion out loud. "I want to help," he said. "I know I owe you that, but it's not about the debt." He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. "They took my sister. They used me. I want to finish this." I thought about what Cho had said about the watcher near the gate zone, about the 3-word confirmation that someone in this operation was still actively monitoring, still assessing. He's still useful. If the network was watching the branch, then Marcus being visibly back and functional and normal was information they were collecting. His presence was a data point I could use. If they were watching the branch, then what they saw in the branch could be managed. What they saw could be shaped. What they believed could be influenced. "Can you recognize the method they used when they first approached you?" I asked. He nodded. "Every piece of it," he said quietly. "I went over it every day for 2 months." "Then here's what I need from you," I said, keeping it at normal cafeteria volume. Nothing that would read as significant to anyone watching from outside the glass. Be exactly what they expect you to be right now. Shaken, grateful, trying to get back to normal. Nothing more. He looked at me. "Which is?" "Someone who is shaken, grateful his sister is safe and trying very hard to get back to normal," I said. "Not someone who is working against them." His jaw tightened slightly. He wanted to do something active. I understood that. 2 months of helplessness built up a significant pressure toward action. I understood that completely. "Being what they expect is the active part," I said. "You become the thing they think they understand, and while they're watching you and thinking they understand you, I'm listening to them." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're going to use me as bait. Not angry, just naming it accurately." "I'm going to use you as a blind," I corrected. "There's a difference," I said. "Bait goes in front of something dangerous without knowing what's behind it. A blind is a controlled position. You know what's happening. You're part of the operation." He thought about that. His heartbeat settled into something more stable, more resolved, the rhythm of someone who had found a way to be useful in a situation that had made them feel powerless. "All right," he said. He picked up his coffee, took a drink, put it down. Normal cafeteria motions. Someone watching from outside would see 2 colleagues having an unremarkable lunch. "One more thing," I said. He looked at me. "Dev's family," I said. "His wife and daughter? Do you know if they had any awareness of what he was involved in?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. His heartbeat told me the answer before his face did. It was the rhythm of someone with information they hadn't known what to do with. "His wife knew something was wrong," he said carefully. "About 4 months ago, she called the branch asking if Dev had seemed stressed. Director Hana took the call." Director Hana, who had told me about Dev's family off the record, who had asked me specifically if the situation was going to change, who had been collecting pieces of this picture too. I filed that, added it to the structure. The picture was getting more complete with every conversation, every heartbeat, every carefully placed data point falling into its slot. "Thank you," I said. Marcus nodded. We finished lunch like 2 colleagues with nothing particular on their minds. I was becoming convinced, the most useful skill I had ever developed. 2 days after the cafeteria conversation, something changed in the branch that I hadn't predicted. A new hunter was assigned to the Valen branch on interdistrict transfer. Her name was Vei, B rank. Ability listed as enhanced kinetic output. Standard heavy combat classification. Strong, fast, high damage. Exactly the kind of B rank any branch was glad to have. She arrived on a Wednesday morning. Introductions in the common room. Brock immediately evaluated her the way Brock evaluated everyone, with pointed skepticism and borderline rude directness. She handled it with the ease of someone who had encountered Brock's type before and found them completely manageable. Her heartbeat during the whole interaction was entirely level. Too level. That was the thing. Brock's particular brand of welcome had produced elevated readings in every other new arrival I'd observed. Vei's rhythm didn't move at all. I watched her settle in from my corner, processed her baseline, filed the reading, said nothing and did nothing, and let the day continue its normal shape around both of us. At the end of that first day, she sat down across from me in the common room, which was exactly what Marcus had done in the cafeteria, which I noted carefully. "You're Soren," she said. Not a question. "The C-rank hearing guy." She said it without the dismissiveness that phrase usually carried. Informational, like she was confirming data. That's the listing," I said. She looked at me with the specific directness of someone who had done research before arriving. "I looked up the Friday incident report," she said. I kept my heartbeat exactly where I wanted it. "It's in the district record," I said. "Anyone can access it." She nodded. "The tip that led to the sub-level recovery," she said. "That came from this branch." "That's what the report says," I said. She looked at me for another moment. "Interesting assignment for a transfer," she said, and then she stood up and went to get coffee. That was all. I sat in the common room after she left and thought about what had just happened. She'd done research. She'd come to me specifically on her first day. She'd referenced the incident with precision, and her heartbeat hadn't moved during any of it. Not when she mentioned the sub-level, not when she held eye contact, not when she said interesting assignment for a transfer. The controlled stillness of someone who had trained their physical responses to give away nothing. That was a specific skill, a skill that had specific applications and a specific kind of training behind it. B rank, listed as enhanced kinetic output. Transferred in after the Friday incident. Made contact with me on day 1. Heartbeat like a professional surveillance operator. Interesting. The network had said he's still useful. I'd assumed they were talking about Marcus or Dev or the creature in custody. I was now reconsidering that assumption. Significantly. I went home that evening and made the secure call to Cho at the intelligence division. Gave her Vei's name and transfer date and ability listing and the conversation verbatim. Cho listened to the whole thing without interrupting once. When I finished, she held the silence for exactly 3 seconds before answering. "The transfer was processed through district administration 6 days ago," she said. Flat and precise. 6 days ago. 2 days before the Friday incident had even become part of the public district record. "Meaning the transfer was arranged before the Friday operation went wrong," I said. "Before they lost the sub-level in Building 7. Another 3-second pause from Cho. "Meaning the transfer wasn't a response to Friday," she said. "It was already planned. Which means Vei's assignment here wasn't triggered by what you did. It was already in motion." I let that sit for a moment. Then, "They were already planning the next phase," I said. "Before Friday, before I heard anything in that alley. They were already 2 steps ahead." "Or," Cho said, "they were planning it in parallel. Friday was one operation. Vei is a different one. The same network, running multiple tracks simultaneously." Multiple tracks. The patient kind of operation, the kind that didn't rely on any single point succeeding, the kind where losing one sub-level didn't collapse the whole structure. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. There was a brief pause. When Cho answered, her tone had shifted slightly, more direct than the careful, analytical voice she'd used in the office. "What you've been doing," she said. "Listen, catalog. Don't move on anything without telling me first. And do not let Vei know you're aware of what she might be." I agreed. Disconnected. Sat in the dark of my apartment for a while, on the city outside, doing its normal nighttime things. Distant traffic, somewhere a window opening, a dog. The network was already 2 steps ahead, maybe more. They had Vei in place before Friday had even happened. They were running multiple tracks. They were patient and resourced and structured. And they were watching a branch where a C rank with good ears had stumbled into one of their operations and apparently been assessed as still useful for something they hadn't told him yet. I sat in the dark and thought about that last part. Still useful, not dangerous, not a threat to be removed. Useful. The difference between those 2 assessments was significant. You removed threats. You managed useful things. You kept them in place, controlled their environment, fed them the information you wanted them to have, and watched what they did with it. If Vei was here to watch me, then I was being managed, evaluated, monitored by a network that had decided I was worth more as an ongoing variable than as an eliminated obstacle. That meant they thought they understood me. thought they had a read on what I was and what I was capable of and how I would respond to various kinds of pressure. They didn't. They couldn't. Because the thing they were watching for was visible. The thing I was actually doing was not. And the gap between those two things was where I lived. I was the C-rank hearing guy. That was what everyone saw. That was what the registry said. That was what the watcher near the gate zone had reported back to whoever was listening. Beneath that, invisible, I had a 2-week catalog of heartbeat data, a direct line to district intelligence, a willing asset in Marcus, and now a confirmed network operative sitting 2 desks away in my own branch. That was the actual picture. The network thought they were running me. I was going to let them believe that for exactly as long as it remained useful, which I estimated at somewhere between 3 weeks and the rest of my foreseeable career. Either way, I was comfortable with it. He's still useful, they'd said. 3 words that had started as a threat assessment and were becoming something I intended to turn completely upside down in their hands. Yes, I thought, sitting in the dark of my apartment in the quiet city that kept going regardless of what moved through its sealed sublevels and its branch common rooms. I am still useful. They were absolutely right about that, and I intended to make sure they kept believing it right up until the moment it stopped serving me. The question was useful to whom? And they were going to find out the hard way that the answer was not them. And the answer to that was something they were going to find out the hard way. The next 3 days, I spent doing something that looked like absolutely nothing. That was intentional. That was the whole point. I showed up on time, filed reports, did my assigned sweeps without incident, ate lunch in the cafeteria, nodded at people in corridors, unremarkable in every possible way. Faye settled into the branch around me. She was competent in the field. I observed her on 2 joint sweeps, and her combat ability was real and correctly rated. But she was also watching. I could feel the focus of her attention the way you can sometimes feel someone's eyes on you in a room even when you're not looking at them. Except in my case, I wasn't feeling it. I was hearing it. The slight directional tilt of her attention, the way her breathing changed when I moved through her peripheral awareness. She was good at hiding it, better than most. The kind of good that came from genuine training and surveillance work, not just field instinct developed over time. But she was watching someone who could hear the difference between a person breathing normally and a person breathing normally, while also carefully tracking another person's location. Those are different sounds. The second one has a quality to it, a subtle control, a deliberate evenness that the first one doesn't. I could distinguish them reliably. Every time Vey ran that controlled breath observation pattern near me, I filed it. Time, location, what I'd been doing, what she could have been reporting back to whoever she was reporting to. After 3 days, I had a reasonably clear picture of her monitoring schedule. She checked in on me most consistently in the morning, around shift start, and again in the early evening. Midday was lighter. Late night, she didn't seem to be monitoring at all, which suggested she had other duties then, or needed the rest, or was reporting during those hours instead. I shared all of this with Cho through the secure channel. Cho processed it and came back 12 hours later with something I hadn't expected, a name above Vey in the structure. Vey reported to a coordinator named Sal, not a hunter, a logistics and transport specialist who operated through 3 legitimate front companies in the district. Sal was the distribution layer, the person who moved things, creatures, information, people, whatever the network needed moved, through the legitimate infrastructure of the city. The thinking creature that had been in the sublevel had passed through Sal's logistics chain, so had the materials used to set up the secondary loading zone. Sal was central. I sat with that for a while. Then I asked Cho the question that had been forming at the back of my mind for the past several days since Vey had arrived. Who is above Sal? Cho's response took longer than usual, 22 hours. When it came back, it was shorter than her typical messages, which I had learned to read as a signal in itself. Unknown. Working on it. Do not pursue independently. That was all. 3 sentences and a warning, which told me that whatever was above Sal was significant enough to require caution. I filed that, kept being unremarkable, kept listening to Vey's monitoring patterns and logging them and sharing them and performing the steady, visible normalcy of a C rank doing his job. On the 4th day after Cho's warning, something shifted in the branch that I felt before I fully understood it. A change in the ambient sound of the building, subtle but real. Director Hana's office had been occupied more than usual that morning. 3 meetings before noon, all with people I didn't recognize from their voices or heartbeat signatures. External visitors, not district authority. I knew those patterns now, not other branch personnel. Someone new. People who hadn't been in this building before today. I walked past Hana's corridor twice at appropriate intervals with appropriate reasons for being in that part of the building. Close enough to catch what I could catch. The voices were kept low. Professional low, the kind of low that meant they knew they were in a shared space and had calibrated accordingly. I caught fragments, not much. Enough. Escalation came through once, clearly. Timeline moved came through twice. and once at a volume that suggested the speaker had briefly forgotten to be careful. The Soren asset. The Soren asset. Me. They were discussing me at director level with external visitors who had moved the timeline on something and were using the word escalation in that context. I went back to my desk and sat down and breathed carefully and thought about what that combination of words meant in the context of everything else I currently knew. Escalation. Timeline moved. The Soren asset. They were accelerating something. Whatever phase Vei's arrival had been preparation for, it was now moving faster than originally planned, which meant one of two things. Either the network was responding to pressure from the district authorities' investigation of Friday, moving before that investigation closed in further, or they had gotten what they needed from observing me, assessed me sufficiently, made their determination about what I was and what I was useful for, and now they were acting on it. He's still useful. The assessment that had felt like a temporary pause was apparently now translating into an operational decision. They were going to make a move, soon. I sent Cho an immediate message, not through the standard channel, the direct line she'd given me for time-sensitive information. 3 words, timeline accelerating, contact now. She called back in 11 minutes. That was faster than her usual response time by a significant margin. I took that as confirmation that she'd been watching for exactly this. What did you hear? No preamble, no procedural framing. Just the direct question from someone who understood that we were now in a different kind of time constraint than before. I told her everything. The meetings in Hana's office, the external visitors, the fragments, the specific phrase that had come through at the moment of the speaker's carelessness. Cho was quiet for a moment after I finished. Not the 3-second calculation pause. Longer. The silence of someone who was restructuring their understanding of something significant. They're not just monitoring you, she said finally. They've decided to use you actively. The Soren asset isn't surveillance language, it's operational language. She paused. They're planning to run an operation through you, she said, using your access, your position, your apparent undervaluation. You're not the target anymore, you're the vehicle. I let that settle. The network had looked at a C-rank hearing hunter in a mid-tier branch and decided he was more useful as a tool than as an obstacle. That was actually almost flattering. What do they want me to do? I asked. Cho's answer was immediate. We don't know yet. But whatever it is, they'll approach you soon. Vei will likely be the contact point. When they approach, I said, what do you want from me? Another pause, then, accept. Whatever they offer, whatever they ask, accept it. And tell me every word of it immediately. I agreed. We disconnected. I sat in my apartment in the dark and thought about the word vehicle and about being useful and about the gap between what I appeared to be and what I was. The network had decided I was useful. The intelligence division wanted me to be an entry point. Director Hana was holding meetings with external visitors about escalation and timelines. And I was sitting in a dark apartment listening to the city and thinking that 3 weeks ago I had been a C-rank hunter who thought his ability was a party trick at best. Things had moved quickly. Things were about to move faster. And somewhere in the morning that was coming, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, Vei was going to come and find me. She was going to offer me something, ask me something, give me a role in something I wasn't supposed to understand the full scope of. And I was going to say yes. I was going to say yes, and I was going to listen to every heartbeat in the room when I did it, and I was going to hear everything they didn't say, along with everything they said. That was the plan. Not complicated, not dramatic. Just the steady accumulation of information by someone who had been dismissed as harmless and intended to stay dismissed until the exact right moment. C-rank, good ears, vehicle, apparently. I could work with that. I'd been working with Les every day since a tired technician with a coffee stain on his coat had said, I closed my eyes. Let my hearing drop to comfortable range. Let the city fill the silence. Let tomorrow be something I would deal with when it arrived. The dog 2 streets away was quiet tonight. The couple upstairs was already asleep. My neighbor 3 doors down had stopped her phone call an hour ago, everything in its place. I fell asleep thinking about the word vehicle and what it meant to be driven by people who didn't know the driver had his own map and his own destination already in mind. Vei came to find me on a Thursday morning, 7:43. I knew she was coming before she rounded the corner because I heard her pace change 2 corridors away. Normal walking has a specific rhythm. Purposeful walking toward a specific person has a different one. The stride lengthens slightly. The breathing takes on a quality of preparation. I was at my desk doing exactly what I'd been doing for the past 4 days, looking completely unremarkable while running a full passive sweep of the building around me. She stopped at the edge of my desk. I looked up. She looked like someone stopping by to ask a routine question. Her heartbeat was the controlled, professional stillness I'd cataloged on day 1. There's a briefing at 9, she said. Director Hana asked me to make sure the full team was notified. Normal, routine, the kind of thing anyone said to anyone on a Thursday morning. I'll be there, I said. She nodded and moved on to the next desk. I watched her go and listened to her heartbeat and noted that it had not moved during the exchange at all, not the briefing. The briefing was real. I'd already seen it on the schedule, but the contact had been made. She'd come to my desk specifically. That was the signal. 9 o'clock. I'd have about an hour before whatever came next. I spent it being exactly what I appeared to be. Finished my morning documentation. Got a second coffee. Waited. The briefing itself was standard. Gate zone updates, rotation assignments, a new protocol for elevated class encounters that Brock immediately had opinions about. 40 minutes. Afterward, as people filed out, Vey fell into step beside me in the corridor. Casual. The easy proximity of two colleagues heading the same direction after a meeting. Normal. Walk with me for a minute, she said. Quiet enough that it didn't carry to the people ahead of us. I said sure, and we turned into the side corridor that led toward the equipment area. When we were alone, she stopped walking, turned to face me. Her heartbeat shifted into something I hadn't heard from her before. Not the surveillance stillness, something more deliberate. The rhythm of someone who has been instructed to have a specific conversation and is now having it. Controlled but purposeful. Professional delivery of a prepared message. I work for people who have been watching you, she said. Direct. No preamble. The approach of someone who had assessed that I would respond better to directness than to misdirection. They were right about that. I looked at her and kept my own heartbeat exactly where I wanted it and said, I know. 2 words. Her rhythm shifted again. Recalibration. She hadn't expected that. She'd been prepared for surprise, for denial, for questions. She hadn't been prepared for someone who already knew and was simply waiting to hear the offer. How long? She asked. I told her since the night I'd heard 2 people talking in an alley about my assignment to the Friday sweep team. She absorbed that without visible reaction. Her heartbeat, though, was doing something new. Not recalibration anymore. Something closer to reassessment. The rhythm of someone updating their model of a situation in real time. They want to offer you a role, she said after a moment. Not surveillance, not management, an active role. They believe your ability has applications they need access to. What applications? I asked. She looked at me steadily. There's a facility, she said. Secured, high value. The people inside it are being held and they need to be found. I kept my expression neutral. Your organization is looking for missing people, I said. She heard the implication in it, and her heartbeat registered it. She didn't flinch. People our organization needs, she said, which was honest at least, not a rescue, a recovery. They needed something from the people inside this facility, and they needed them found first. Why me specifically? I asked. You could hire any number of hunters with tracking abilities, better rated than C, better documented range. I needed to hear her answer to this. Because you found a sealed sublevel through 2 floors of concrete, she said, and a guarded building by sound alone, in the dark, with no prior intelligence on either location. She paused. The facility we're looking for is shielded, mana dampened. Standard detection abilities don't penetrate it. We believe acoustic-based perception might operate differently. Mana dampened. That was interesting. Standard hunter abilities ran on mana frequency. That was how the awakening system worked, how ranked abilities were measured and classified. My ability ran on sound. Physical sound waves, not mana frequency, not energy detection. Actual acoustic information traveling through actual physical space, a different mechanism entirely. A mana-dampening field would block energy-based detection completely, but it wouldn't stop sound. Concrete conducted it, metal conducted it, earth conducted it, everything conducted it. If people were being held inside a mana-dampened facility, no standard detection ability would find them. But I might hear their heartbeats through the walls. Maybe, depending on distance and material. I let none of this show on my face, kept it at the mild interest level of someone considering an unusual job offer. What's the timeline? I asked. She said, 48 hours? 48 hours. They'd said the timeline had moved. This was how much it had moved. 2 days. Whatever was in that facility, the network needed it before the district authority got there first. I need to think about it, I said. Her heartbeat registered the response and didn't spike with impatience. They'd anticipated I might need time. They'd built that into the offer. You have until tonight, she said. If you're in, meet me at the East Vehicle Bay at 9 p.m. We'll go over the details then. She held my gaze for one moment, then she walked away. I stood in the corridor alone for approximately 4 seconds. Then I went to the bathroom, checked it was empty, and sent Cho the secure message. Everything, word for word, 48 hours. Cho's response came back in 6 minutes, the fastest she had ever responded to anything I'd sent. Except, I will have a team positioned. You will not be alone in this. Trust the process. Trust the process. That was a sentence Cho had never used before. It was the sentence of someone telling you that the larger picture was already accounted for. Stay in your lane, move. I went back to my desk, finished my workday, ate dinner in the cafeteria, nodded at Brock, who was still complaining about the new encounter protocol. Normal, unremarkable. At 8:50, I put on my field jacket and walked to the east vehicle bay. Vey was already there. A transport with no branch markings was idling in the bay beside her. She looked at me. I looked at her. "I'm in," I said. She nodded once. We got in the transport, and I extended my hearing as wide as it would go and started memorizing everything. The route took 40 minutes. I tracked it by sound. Street noise patterns, traffic density changes, the specific acoustic signature of different surface types under the vehicle's tires. We went north, then northwest, into an area I didn't know well, an older part of the district where the buildings were dense and the streets were narrow and the city sounded different. The transport stopped. We got out. A building in front of us, 8 stories, old construction, the kind of brick and steel framework that was built before the gates appeared. 3 people already there waiting for us. I didn't know any of them by heartbeat. New signatures, all of them, which meant this was not the same crew from the sub-level operation. A man with a quiet, precise voice made introductions without using names, just roles. Approach, extraction, containment. I was listed as detection. Fine, I could work with that. They had blueprints of the facility's exterior. The building was 3 blocks from where we were standing. Lower level, partially underground, mana dampened, as Vey had said. The dampening field was projected from emitters on the building's corners. I could actually hear the faint, high-frequency hum of them when I extended my range toward the target building. That was useful information I kept entirely to myself. If they knew I could detect the emitters, they'd know more about the ceiling of my ability than they'd accounted for. Not yet. "Can you detect occupants from this distance?" the quiet-voiced man asked. 3 blocks. The building was old construction, dense brick, original steel framing, thick floor plates. I pushed my hearing out toward it carefully. Extended range, maximum focus, filtering ambient city sound layer by layer until I had the building isolated as much as I could manage. Heartbeats. Faint through the distance and the material, but present. I counted carefully, not fast. This required precision. I went through the building floor by floor. 7 people, I said after about 90 seconds. 2 on the upper level, moving. 1 on what feels like the second floor, stationary elevated heart rate. 4 in the lower level. The 4 in the lower level. Those were the ones. Their heartbeats had a quality I'd identified before. The exhausted elevated rhythm of sustained captivity. The same sound Marcus's sister had made. Lower level, 4, I said. "They're alive." The quiet-voiced man looked at Vey. Something passed between them. A small adjustment in both their heartbeats simultaneously. They'd been uncertain about whether the targets were still alive. I had just resolved that uncertainty, which meant I had just made myself more valuable to this operation in real time. Valuable. Useful. The Soren asset, detecting things nobody else could detect, giving the network information they needed in the field. Exactly what they'd wanted me for. I thought about Cho's message. Trust the process. I thought about the team she'd said would be positioned. I couldn't hear them yet. I extended my range in all directions carefully. And then, at the edge of my maximum range, at the very limit of what I could reliably resolve, I found them. 5 people, positioned in a loose perimeter around the block. Moving in coordination, maintaining spacing. The specific movement pattern of a tactical team holding a surrounding position, not approaching yet, waiting for something, waiting for a signal. Cho had a team in position. They were already here. They'd been here before I arrived, which meant she'd moved them the moment I'd sent the message. That was preparation. That was what trust the process had meant. The process was already running. I was the part of it that was inside the operation. The team outside was the other part. Both needed to move. I needed to give the team outside a reason to move. Cho had said she'd have them positioned, but she'd also said, don't move on anything without telling me first. Communication. I didn't have a way to communicate with Cho's team from where I was standing. No device, no signal. They were outside. I was inside the operation with 5 people who would notice anything abnormal. I stood in the planning circle with the quiet-voiced man and Vey and the 3 others and looked at the blueprints and thought very fast about how to solve this specific problem. The emitters. The amount of dampening emitters I'd identified by their high-frequency hum on the building corners. If the emitters went offline, the field would collapse. A collapsed dampening field would be detectable by Cho's team through standard energy monitoring. The moment it dropped, they'd know something had changed inside the operation perimeter. That was the signal. Not a message, not a device. The field itself dropping would be readable from outside as an indication that something had shifted inside. Cho would understand that. She had a probability assessment ability. She'd been calculating this scenario from the moment she'd told me to accept the offer. She'd know what a dropped field meant. I was certain. The question was how I got to the emitters. The plan the quiet-voiced man was laying out involved a direct approach to the lower level through the building's service entrance. I was supposed to confirm occupant locations in real time as the team moved, a living radar, walking through the building, pointing at walls and saying here and here and here. That was my role in their operation. It was also going to put me inside the building, which was going to put me closer to the emitters than I was right now. Considerably closer. "One condition before we go in," I said. The quiet-voiced man stopped his briefing. His heartbeat registered mild surprise at the interruption. Vay's registered wariness. The others, attention. "I need to confirm the lower-level occupants are in stable condition before extraction begins," I said. "I'm not navigating this building for a recovery that ends badly." I said it simply. It was the kind of condition a person with genuine moral concerns would set. It was also the kind of condition that would require me to be positioned very close to the lower level, very close to the emitters. The quiet-voiced man's heartbeat considered it. Then, "Agreed. Confirm status before the extraction team moves." He said it like he was accommodating a reasonable professional concern. Fine. We approached the building from the south. Service entrance, as planned. The door was unlocked. Someone had arranged access in advance. The network had inside access to this building, too. Inside. Old concrete floor. The acoustic signature of the space clarified immediately as the city noise cut off behind the door. More information, more data points, the map of sound. I had the building mapped within 30 seconds of entering. Upper level, 2 people moving. Second floor, 1 stationary person whose elevated heartbeat had just begun to calm, as if they were sensing, without knowing why or how, that something was fundamentally about to change inside this specific building on this specific night. And the 4 in the lower level, down a service stairwell, behind what sounded like a reinforced door based on the way sound reflected off its surface. The emitters. From inside the building I could hear them clearly, corner-mounted, ground floor level. 2 on the south side, 2 on the north, humming at a frequency that moved very faintly through the old concrete under my feet. Physical vibration, not mana, sound. We went down the service stairwell. The quiet-voiced man first, then his 2 companions, then me, then Vay at the rear. Standard tactical order for a 5-person entry team. On the lower-level landing, I stopped. "The room on the left," I said. 4 occupants, all alive. 2 are in worse condition than the others. Irregular heartbeats, consistent with extended stress. The quiet-voiced man nodded, indicated to his team. They began setting up at the reinforced door, and I turned slightly, as if adjusting my position to better face the room I'd indicated. The south side emitter was in the wall of the stairwell, at the base of the building's corner, 3 meters from where I was standing. I could hear its specific hum precisely. I reached into my jacket pocket, the electromagnetic pulse tool, the same tool that had opened the utility door in Building 7, the one that operated on commercial lock frequencies. Emitters ran on power systems. Power systems had frequency signatures. I didn't know if the tool would work on a mana emitter. I had maybe 4 seconds to find out before anyone noticed. I crouched, as if checking something on the floor. Brought the tool against the wall at the emitter's location. Maximum output. Held it for 2 full seconds. The hum stuttered. Caught myself. Stood up. Returned my attention to the door. The quiet-voiced man glanced at me. I said, "Sorry. Thought I heard something shift in the room. Still 4. He turned back. The emitter had stuttered. Not fully offline, but the field would have fluctuated. Outside, on Cho's monitoring equipment, that fluctuation would have registered. It would have been noticed. Cho's probability assessment would now be running the calculation. Field fluctuation. Inside operative. 48-hour timeline. Tactical team in position. What was the probability? I was betting she'd already told her team to prepare to move. That was the bet I had made when I pressed the tool against that wall. Everything from this point depended on that bet being correct. The reinforced door opened. The extraction team moved inside. I stayed in the doorway, maintaining the detection role I'd been assigned, and extended my hearing upward. Upper level. The 2 people who had been moving were now stationary. Their heartbeats had changed. They were listening. Something had reached them. A sound, a vibration, a frequency. The field fluctuation, the emitter's stutter. Something had been detectable to whoever was on the upper level, and they were now on alert. I had maybe 60 seconds, maybe less. "Upper level has gone alert," I said flatly. The quiet-voiced man's head came up from the extraction room. His heartbeat spiked for the first time since I'd known him. Controlled response. "Can you tell what they're doing?" he asked. I listened. "Moving toward the stairwell," I said. "Both of them. Fast." His team recalculated immediately. Good professionals, fast adjusters. "Vay, stairwell." She was already moving. The quiet-voiced man returned to the extraction room. I stayed in the doorway and listened to everything happening simultaneously. Upper level, the 2 coming down, Vay going up. Their approach vectors were going to intersect at the 2nd floor landing. That was going to be loud, and I needed to time what came next. The second-floor person was still stationary, but their heartbeat had shifted into a different register entirely. The specific rhythm of someone who knows something is wrong and is preparing for a specific response. Not panic, preparation. Professional, not a captive, a handler, someone positioned on the second floor to manage the lower level. Their preparation sound was the preparation sound of someone reaching for a communication device. If they transmitted anything out of this building right now, the network would know. The operation would collapse. Cho's team outside might not make it in before everything changed. Second floor, I said. One person. They're about to transmit. The quiet-voiced man looked at me from inside the extraction room. 1 second of decision. Then, deal with it. He said that to me, not to his team, who were occupied with the extraction. To me. The C-rank hearing. Hunter, who was not an extraction specialist and had never been inside an active operation before tonight. I looked at him for exactly 1 second. Then I went up the stairwell. Past the first landing, up to the second floor door, which was closed. I put my hand on it, pushed it open, went through. The handler, 40s, compact, communicator already in his hand. He looked at me like a professional encountering something he hadn't planned for. His heartbeat said he was still in the deciding phase. 1 full second of decision-making. That was the window I had, and I used every millisecond of it. I heard his heartbeat. I heard his breathing. I heard the exact moment he made the decision to transmit, regardless of who I was, because the risk of not transmitting was worse. His hand moved toward the communicator's activation. My hand moved to intercept it. Not a fight. A collision of two people both reaching for the same object at almost the same moment. I had half a second of warning. He had none. My hand closed on the communicator before he'd finished the activation gesture. I stepped back. Put the communicator in my jacket. He looked at me. His heartbeat was the specific rhythm of someone reassessing everything they thought they knew about what was happening in this building right now. Sit down, I said. He sat down. Not because I was physically threatening, I wasn't especially, but because I'd moved with a precision and a certainty that communicated more than size did. Above us, the sound of Vey making contact with the two from the upper level. Below, the extraction team working. Outside, Cho's team and what I'd given them to work with. The field fluctuation. I heard it before anyone else in the building. The sound of 5 people moving in coordinated tactical formation from the building's perimeter toward the south entrance. They were coming in. Cho's team was moving. The bet had been correct. The field fluctuation had been enough. The probability assessment had landed exactly where I'd needed it to. There are people outside this building who are about to come through the door, I said to the man sitting at the desk. When they do, cooperate completely. Your situation improves significantly if you do. His heartbeat said he was calculating whether I was telling the truth. I kept my own rhythm completely steady and looked at him and let him make his calculation. He arrived at the correct answer. Downstairs. The south entrance opened. 5 people came through it quickly and efficiently. Within 90 seconds, the building was entirely different from what it had been 2 minutes ago. Cho's team moved through the lower level and collected the extraction team and the network operatives and the 4 captives who were now being helped out of the reinforced room. The quiet-voiced man and his 2 team members were in Cho's team's custody inside of 3 minutes. Clean, fast, professional. The kind of operation that had been planned for, not improvised. Faye was in the stairwell, sitting against the wall, one hand pressed against her ribs where the contact with the upper-level team had been harder than she'd anticipated. She looked at me when I came down the stairs. Her heartbeat was doing something I hadn't cataloged before. Not fear, not calculation, something more complicated. Recognition. You were never going to help them, she said, not angry. Just stating the thing that had just become clear to her. You were already working against them when I made contact. Yes, I said. She absorbed that. Her heartbeat settled into something that was almost respect. Not comfortable respect. The specific respect of one professional for another who had beaten them clearly. How much of it did you know before I came to your desk this morning? She asked. I thought about it. Most of it, I said. Not the facility location, not the specific targets. The rest. She nodded slowly. The alley, she said. You heard the alley conversation. First night, I said. She closed her eyes for a moment, then she opened them. I'm going to cooperate, she said. Whatever the authority wants. I'm done. Her heartbeat said she meant it. Not calculated cooperation. Genuine. The sound of someone who had made a real decision. I'll tell them that, I said. One of Cho's team members came to collect her. She went without resistance. I watched her go and felt the building settling around me in the aftermath. The 4 captives. I found Cho in the lower level coordinating their removal. She looked at me when I walked in. Her heartbeat was doing the slow calculation rhythm, same as always. The emitter, she said. Not a question. I confirmed. It was enough, she said. The fluctuation registered clearly. I knew immediately. She paused. Good timing. You positioned the team the moment I sent the first message, I said. You were already planning to move when the right signal came. She looked at me for a moment. Probability assessment, she said. Once you accepted the approach, the probability of a usable internal signal within the target window was above 90%. She paused. I didn't know it would be the emitter, she said, but I knew it would be something. You're consistent. That word again. Consistent. I decided to take it as intended. One of the captives, a woman in her 30s, movement slow but deliberate. She walked past me on her way out with the extraction support and stopped briefly, looked at me directly. Her heartbeat was nothing like the exhausted, sustained fear rhythm I'd heard through the walls. It had shifted. Not relief exactly, something more active, more purposeful. Hunter, she said. Her voice was steady despite everything. The organization that held us. There's a level above what you found tonight. She held my gaze. They won't stop. I know, I said. She nodded once. Then she moved on with the support team and was gone into the stairwell, and the building continued settling around me in the quiet. They won't stop. I already knew that. The network had layers above Sal, above Vey, above the quiet-voiced man with the extraction team. The woman in the alley was still out there. Whatever was above her was still operating, still patient, still running multiple tracks simultaneously across a district, and probably across more than one district, and probably across more than one city. And somewhere in that structure, an assessment existed, a file or a notation or a conversation that said the Soren asset had been lost, that the operation had failed, that adjustments were needed. I walked out of the building into the night air. The city was still doing its thing. Traffic, distant and steady. Somewhere a window. The usual dog, quiet tonight. Cho's team was finishing their perimeter work outside. Vehicles were arriving for transport. The whole operation was wrapping up with the clean efficiency of people who had done this before. I stood on the sidewalk and extended my hearing one more time. Wide sweep. Taking inventory of the immediate area. Cataloging everything I could reach. The network watcher, who had stood near the gate zone saying he's still useful, I reached for that signature, the specific heartbeat pattern I'd memorized from that one night. Not there. Gone. Either relocated or warned off when the operation started unraveling. Smart. Clean evacuation of surveillance assets when things went wrong. Consistent with patient professional operation. Cho came out of the building and stood beside me. We both looked at the street for a moment. The woman who spoke to you inside, she said. We know who she is. I looked at her. She was a district intelligence analyst, Cho said. Taken 8 weeks ago, we thought she was dead. She paused. The facility was a data extraction site. Data extraction. They'd been pulling information from captured intelligence analysts, building a picture of something from the inside of the district authority's own knowledge base. That was what they needed the mana-dampened facility for. That was what they needed living captives for. Not leverage, not ransom, information. The patient, thorough, systematic kind. What were they extracting? I asked. Cho was quiet for a moment. The calculation rhythm, the slow, careful assessment. Then, everything they could get about hunter-ability registries. Hunter-ability registries. The official documentation of every awakened ability in the district. Ranges, mechanisms, operational ceilings. Everything the authority knew about what every hunter could do. They'd been building a complete map of hunter abilities, learning what each person could actually do versus what their official classification said, learning where the gaps were, where the detection missed things, where the monitoring had blind spots, where you could move something, a creature, a person, a shipment, without being caught. And there was a gap they probably hadn't fully accounted for yet. A C-rank listing that said enhanced auditory perception and a registry entry that hadn't been formally reevaluated. A gap that was walking around the district right now in a field jacket, listening to everything, being assessed as still useful, being filed as a known variable with a known ceiling, a ceiling that was significantly lower than the actual number, a ceiling that was going to stay significantly lower than the actual number for as long as that served any purpose. They'll adjust, I said. When they process what happened tonight, they'll know the facility is burned. They'll move the data extraction somewhere else. Start over. Yes, Cho said. We'll be looking for where. She looked at me. We'd like you to keep doing what you're doing. She said it simply. No pressure, no weight, just a statement. Keep doing what I was doing. Being the C-rank hearing hunter in the mid-tier branch, filing reports, eating in the cafeteria, listening to everything, cataloging everything. Being the thing nobody looked at too carefully because the registry said C-rank and enhanced auditory perception, and the technician who'd registered me had said good hearing, like it was an apology. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, I said. Cho nodded. She started back toward the building to finish her coordination. Stopped. turned back. "Formal reevaluation," she said. "Whenever you want it, whatever it shows. The authority will support whatever classification comes out of it." She paused. "No pressure. Your call. My call. A reevaluation would change my registry entry, change what the network knew about me, change the gap that was currently one of the most useful things I owned. I stood on that sidewalk and thought about that gap, about what it was worth, about how long I needed to keep it exactly where it was. "I'll let you know when the timing is right," I said. She nodded one more time and went back inside. I stayed on the sidewalk and looked at the street and thought the city around me was doing what it always did, indifferent to the fact that a building 3 feet behind me had just been the site of a data extraction facility, just being a city. I thought about the analyst, the one who had stopped in the stairwell and looked at me directly. "They won't stop," she'd said, like she needed someone in that building to understand the full weight of it. She was right, and I had known it before she said it, and I had built the past 3 weeks around that knowledge, without needing anyone to confirm it out loud for me. She was right. They weren't going to stop. Patient operations run by people with significant resources and a systematic approach to intelligence gathering didn't stop because one node got burned. They adjusted. They rebuilt. They opened new tracks while the old ones were still running. They moved their watcher away from the gate zone and positioned a new one somewhere I hadn't found yet, somewhere I was going to find. Because that was what I did. I listened. I cataloged. I built a picture one data point at a time with no one watching me do it because no one thought there was anything to watch. I put my hands in my pockets, started walking home, extended my hearing out in the familiar evening sweep, taking inventory of the night around me, the city that kept going. The dog 2 streets away was doing its late night routine. My neighbor, 3 doors down, had her television on. The couple upstairs was still awake, talking quietly about something. Everything where it should be. Everything normal and ordinary, and exactly what it sounded like from the outside. Just a Thursday night in a city with gate rifts in its sky. Somewhere in that network, in the layers above what I'd touched tonight, a conversation was happening about a failed operation, about a facility burned, about an asset lost. And somewhere in that same conversation, someone was trying to figure out how much the Soren asset knew, how useful he still was, whether he was still manageable, or whether he had become something else. I was looking forward to that conversation getting to its conclusion. Looking forward to the moment when their assessment finally updated to match the reality of what I actually was. C rank, good ears. The thing nobody looked at too carefully until it was too late to look away. I'd been that thing for 3 weeks, and I intended to keep being it for as long as necessary. The network was still out there. The woman from the alley was still out there. The level above the facility was still operating. And I was a C-rank hunter walking home on a Thursday night. And every single thing I could reach with my hearing, from the dog to the television to the couple talking quietly upstairs and out through the city as far as my range would carry, all of it was mine. All of it was information. All of it was the ongoing picture of a world that kept moving and making sounds and giving away its secrets to anyone patient enough to listen. I was patient enough. I had always been patient enough. That was the thing nobody had written in any registry or documented in any assessment file. That had always been the actual ability. The hearing was just the mechanism. The patience was the power. And patience, unlike heartbeats, was something that didn't show up in any official record anywhere. I walked home, made tea, sat at the table, let the city fill the silence, and thought about what came next, and felt for the first time in a very long time, completely ready for it. My name is Kai Soren. I'm a C-rank hunter with an ability the awakening technician described as good hearing. Everything else is something nobody has officially measured yet. That's fine. That's exactly fine. They'll figure it out eventually. And when they do, I'll already be 3 steps ahead of that moment, listening to what comes after it. Some things are worth more when nobody knows you have them. Some advantages are worth keeping quiet. Some gaps in official records are the most valuable thing you own. And some C ranks with good ears are waiting very patiently for the right moment to show everyone exactly what they've been missing all along. That moment was coming. I had been hearing it build for 3 weeks, 1 heartbeat at a time, in the steady, accumulating way that everything important announced itself to anyone patient enough to listen for it. I was patient enough. I had always been patient enough. That was the part nobody had put in any registry. That was the real ability. And I was only just getting started. 3 days after the facility operation, I was back at my desk in the Velen branch doing the same things I always did. Filing reports, drinking coffee, looking unremarkable. Brock was complaining about something new. Sarah was on her phone. Marcus was 2 rows ahead of me, quieter than before, but present and functional and steadily recalibrating. The district authority had processed everyone from the facility operation, and the branch had been officially notified that a network-connected agent had been removed from active duty. They didn't name Vey in the notice, standard procedure for ongoing investigations, but people noticed an empty desk and people drew conclusions, and the branch had its own quiet recalibration. I sat in the middle of all of it and listened and cataloged and noted which people's rhythms changed when the notice was mentioned and which ones stayed exactly the same. Most changed slightly. Normal response to learning someone you worked alongside had been operating against the branch. Normal recalibration. Normal and unremarkable and healthy. One didn't change at all. A junior logistics coordinator named Pell, who I had noted once before as having an unusually controlled baseline. I noted it again, filed it, said nothing. One data point wasn't evidence of anything, but one data point at the right moment, added to the ongoing catalog, was the beginning of a pattern. I was patient about patterns. Director Hana called me in on the 4th day. Short meeting. She told me the district authority had formally commended the branch for its cooperation with the facility operation. She said it the way she said things, precisely without unnecessary framing. And then she looked at me for a moment with the specific expression of someone who knew more than they were saying. "You've been busy," she said. Not accusing, not quite approving either, somewhere in between. The assessment of a senior professional watching a junior one operate outside expected parameters. "I've been doing my job," I said. She considered that. Her heartbeat was the slow, trained fighter's rhythm, same as always. Then, "Keep doing it," she said. That was the whole meeting. Keep doing it. 3 words that were a different kind of authorization than anything in a formal commission or a registry update or an intelligence division agreement. The authorization that comes from a senior person deciding not to stop you. The kind of authorization that existed in the space between what was said and what was permitted. I understood that space. I went back to my desk, extended my hearing in the familiar sweep. The building, the street outside, the surrounding blocks. Everything in its usual position, everything where it belonged, except one thing. Very far out, near the edge of my reliable range, in the direction of the district's north quarter where the old industrial buildings clustered together. A heartbeat, specific. One I hadn't heard before, controlled and professional and patient in a way that was distinct from every other controlled professional heartbeat I'd cataloged. Just standing there, somewhere out in the north quarter, not moving, just present, oriented in the direction of the Valen Branch building from a distance of approximately 800 meters. A new watcher. The network had repositioned. They'd moved their surveillance asset to a new location, adjusted their angle, maintained their monitoring of the branch, patient, consistent. They were still watching. That was not a surprise. That was exactly what a patient, well-resourced network did when one node got burned. They adjusted and continued, and they had a new watcher positioned 800 meters out in a direction that was technically beyond the documented performance parameters for a C-rank hearing ability. Technically, according to the registry, according to the assessment that hadn't been formally reevaluated, according to the gap that was still exactly where I'd kept it. I sat at my desk and listened to that distant heartbeat and thought about how long to let this particular situation develop before deciding what to do with it. A while, I decided, long enough to learn the pattern, long enough to understand the rhythm of this specific person and what they did between their monitoring check-ins, long enough to map the North Quarter surveillance position the way I'd mapped every other thing I'd needed to map. Slowly, carefully, without anyone knowing I was doing it. That was the job. Not flashy, not fast, not the kind of thing that ended in dramatic confrontations in dark corridors, although it sometimes also ended in those. Mostly it was this. A desk, a coffee that had gone slightly cold, a building full of people with their own rhythms and their own stories and their own unknowing contributions to my catalog. And out there in the city, a network that was patient and resourced and still operating, still running its tracks, still moving things through the gaps in what the official record said anyone could detect. A network that had decided, weeks ago, that a C-rank hunter with good ears was still useful. That had been their assessment, and they hadn't changed it yet. I picked up my coffee, took a sip, looked at the report I was supposed to be finishing, started writing. The words came easily because the report was simple, and I had done this many times. And underneath the report, underneath the routine and the filing and the cafeteria lunches and the corridor nods, the catalog kept building. The picture kept completing, one heartbeat at a time, one data point at a time. 800 meters away and getting clearer every minute because I had been practicing this for weeks, and I was getting better at it. Getting better. That was the other thing nobody had documented. Abilities developed, ranges extended, precision improved. The ceiling the registry listed was the ceiling at Awakening, not the ceiling now. The ceiling now was something I was still in the process of discovering, still pushing against, still finding further out than I'd found it the week before. Somewhere, out there in the North Quarter, a watcher was standing in a position they thought was safely beyond detection and monitoring a branch building that they thought contained a useful, manageable asset. I finished my report, submitted it, got up for more coffee, nodded at Brock, who grunted, said something brief to Sarah, who was less dismissive than she used to be, came back to my desk, sat down, extended my hearing north, checked the watcher's position. Still there, still steady, still patient in the way the network was always patient. Good, I thought. Stay there. Stay exactly there. Give me time to learn your rhythm and your schedule and your check-in patterns and whatever else you're willing to give away by simply existing. Because that was what everything gave away when you were willing to listen carefully enough and long enough and with enough patience to let the picture build at its own pace. Everything made sound. Everything had a rhythm. Everything that moved through the world left an acoustic trace for anyone with the ability and the patience to read it. I was that person. I had always been that person. The awakening test had labeled it enhanced auditory perception and rated it C rank, and a tired technician had said good hearing without blinking. And somewhere in the north quarter of a city full of gates and monsters and networks and secrets, a watcher was standing at 800 meters thinking they were invisible. They were not invisible. They had never been invisible. They were just standing at a distance that made them invisible to everyone except the one person who happened to be listening. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was, as it turned out, exactly enough to change everything one careful step at a time, for as long as it needed to take. I sipped my coffee. It was cold. I drank it anyway. Outside the branch building, the city was being a city, loud and complicated and full of sounds that were full of information. All of it mine. All of it building. All of it pointing, one data point at a time, toward whatever came next in a story that was nowhere near finished. Not even close. My name is Kai Soren, C-rank hunter with an officially listed ability called Enhanced Auditory Perception, registered at C-rank by a tired technician who described it as good hearing. And I am listening to everything this network is willing to give away to anyone stubborn enough to keep at it. That, it turns out, is quite a lot.